Okay folks, how are you all doing? There's a couple of sign-in sheets going around there. Just make sure you get your name on the sign-in sheet. I'm going to kick off in about 2 minutes. We've just gone live to the other centre, so just give me 2 seconds and I'm with you now. I wanted to put Rocky music on and come in through the doors here, but they told me I wasn't allowed. Which? I've asked them to leave us. This is free medication, isn't it? Are they selling premix on?
Yeah, try to He's actually on there about 2 4 months. I thought you were pushing him out of this time. Being sponsored by Brigade.
Okay folks, you're all very, very welcome and good evening to everyone. I don't know if these people that are all sitting here may want to move to here to see the big screen. It's entirely up to yourself because you're all kind of stuck in the corner. If you're happy enough with what you're seeing, if not, move across. You're happy enough? That's actually clearer, isn't it? Good evening and welcome to our nearly 18th month now of doing this, which is huge. I didn't think I'd be standing back up here 18 months ago. I say it every time I start one of these nights. We started with a room in the OBI with 9 people turning up on the night. 3 of them were personal friends of mine who just decided to come along for the crack. So that's 6 people were interested. Currently at the moment, what we've done on this occasion, and I'll ask you all to do the same, through Eventbrite, which is a planning or kind of a system you can apply to come to the course. Most of you have probably booked on it anyway. It's a booking system. But we are live to 19 venues around the country. I have Dr. Sinead Breen on, who's on a team is linking in from Sydney Hems in Australia. We have Jason Coyne and Donald Lonigan linking in with members of National Ambulance Abu Dhabi, so you're all very welcome there. Also some members from fire services across the UK for the first time are linking in as well. So we're trying to get a total number of people who actually watch, because there were certain venues this time that we didn't have last time. So some people will actually have to link in from their homes in the likes of Kerry, West Cork and other areas of the country, which is what this is all about. We have Donegal going live, and that's being done through Keith Kennedy and Letterkenny General Hospital. So there's a team up there as well, and Naas General Hospital have linked in also. So there's a lot of people that's kind of linking in from outside, but we want to get the true numbers, and we can only do that through Eventbrite. We've let the Eventbrite registration go until 11 o'clock this evening. So there's 2 prongs to it. It helps us to identify how many people are linking in. It also gives us proper email addresses, because every time we go to send out your cert, we get about 20 to 30 emails bouncing back because we can't read your emails, your email address correctly. In other words, we can't read your writing. Okay, so that's kind of handy if we get it in through the Eventbrite. So please, if you haven't registered through Eventbrite, please do so. It's free, it's simple, it just gives us an email address, and it's only for us. Nobody else gets access to that email address. That's the first thing I'll say to you. I try to put this up because it's February and it's Valentine's Day, but I think the meaning of what we're all about, what we try to make CPC nights about, is that words are inspirational, training can go on and go on, but we want to try and get the message out to everybody else that this is not just about what you're required to do as a professional member of the Pre-Hospital Emergency Care Council registry. Okay, it's for your own learning and education, and the more people we get involved in that free learning and education, the better for everybody will learn and be at the end of it all. So please use your words. So, what's tonight all about? Tonight's speakers will be made up by Adrian Grady, who's a sub-officer from Dublin Fire Brigade. He is the CISM coordinator with Dublin Fire Brigade, which is Critical Incident Stress Management. Okay, and he's going to give a talk as part of a series. The series we're calling it is Take Your Mental Health to the Gym and Give It a Good Workout. I'm not talking about physically going into a gym and start getting on a treadmill or anything like that, although that is very, very beneficial. We're talking about different topics that's very rarely discussed when we talk about mental health. I found a lot of discussion around CISM was based around how you're feeling or how you reacted to an incident with regards to a patient. But personally, in the last 18 months, I've lost a couple of colleagues in work. I know certainly you have lost friends, family and colleagues as well. So we're linking that all in. So it's how to deal with actually losing a member of your family and friends. It is an emotional topic. Some of you may have lost somebody very recently and may want to leave, and that's fully understandable as well. So that's going to be going for about 20 minutes. So if you want to leave, we'll give you a shout and go back into the room. It's no problem at all. Additional to that, we're going to play a piece from the Berkeley incident. I was listening to the radio one day, and it was on drive time with RTE1 radio. They'd done a small piece with regards to the rescuers who attended the Berkeley incident, the collapse of the balcony. And we have that piece and a couple of pictures from the incident, so we're going to play that for you as well this evening. There's a fellow called Glen Ellis who's going to give a talk with regards to some research and light reading. I don't know how that's going to go because I've been knocked already from the audience. And then a good friend of mine, Dr. Alan Watts, who's involved with, he's a special registrar in medicine from CUH in Cork, very involved in the AP programme through UCD, and I think a lot of you would have come across him through EMS Gathering, and this is why we're sporting our new t-shirts tonight, the EMS Gathering. Don't panic, just go to the gathering and get lots of education and meet lots of new people. It's really, really good. So Kieran Henry's paid me to wear this t-shirt tonight, so thanks Kieran. So Alan, you might know Dr. Alan Watts from that as well. Tonight's hashtag is #OBICPC. Please tweet any information, any comments, anything you hear, you feel of interest. Get involved, get it out on Twitter. The OBICPC Twitter page as such has increased 3 or 4-fold in the last 24 to 48 hours. And we're being followed on LinkedIn as well now, so we're getting out there to more numbers. And because of this newfound fame we're getting, SP Services, in conjunction with Kevin O'Brien, who's the salesman, has sponsored 2 prizes for tonight's show. So the best question and the best tweet on the night will get this prize, one of these prizes. Okay. So if you can see there, we've got a digital sphygmomanometer. That's the word, sphygmomanometer, and we have a Littmann stethoscope as well. Okay, so the best prize or best tweet, best question that comes in tonight will be get one of these, and it's thanks to Kevin O'Brien from SP Services, who is also a member of the Irish Red Cross, has donated these prizes tonight for tonight's show. So just trying to get a bit of interest on it. At the back we've got Dan Fines, who's operating the Twitter machine, and then we've got Danny Davern as well, or Danny Snevin, who's organising from the camera work as well, and we'll talk about them later on. Okay, so let's get it on. Adrian, you're very welcome to the stand if you want to come on down. So just while Adrian is setting up, I'm just going to play this clip.
June 16th, 2015, the night the Berkeley balcony tragedy happened. 6 young students died. June 16th, 2015, the night the Berkeley balcony tragedy happened. 6 young students died, 7 others were seriously injured when a balcony collapsed in the Californian University city at an apartment complex. June 16th, 2015, the night the Berkeley balcony tragedy happened. 6 young students died, 7 others were seriously injured when a balcony collapsed in the Californian University city at an apartment complex. They'd all been at a 21st birthday party. Now, the emergency workers who were first at the scene have been speaking for the first time. Claudine Wong of KTVU Fox TV News in California reports.
It was just another day on the job.
I was in swing shift, and it was almost end of my shift.
I was halfway through my shift.
As soon as the first officers got on, they called for additional officers. They're calling for more. It didn't sound good.
Finished with another call.
I was assisting in a staffing shortage, so I was now on to hour 12 or 13 of the day.
And then the call came in, and everything changed.
Here comes the call.
Saying that one of the balconies broke and at least 10 people fell from the 2nd or 3rd floor.
As soon as the first officers got on, they called for additional officers. They're calling for more. It didn't sound good.
Once we got there, and once I parked my car, and I could see multiple people just laying on the ground.
And what was the first thing that struck you?
Just the amount of injured students that were on the sidewalk.
It almost looked like a training event. It didn't look real. There was people covered in blood, people asking for help.
It sounds like the help couldn't come fast enough. I mean, was it an overwhelming situation to try to figure out who to help and when? How do you manage that?
When I arrived there, I was right underneath the balcony. I looked up and I see the balcony right there, balancing. And then, like, okay, we have all these people. We need to do something.
It could, at any moment, come down.
We're still working underneath
But we're still working underneath it and trying to get them out of there.
They wanted to save them all, but they couldn't.
There was a mound of deceased bodies, and it was just, it was surreal. I mean, that's how they landed, that's how they were, and there was nothing we could do for them, and it's not like anything we've ever seen or trained and practiced for, so.
You can't train for that.
No.
So they focused on the survivors.
She put her hand, just basically threw her hand across her body. Like, okay, she got some kind of reaction, so at least we got somebody's alive, some movement.
Is there a helplessness to that feeling that there's too many
For me,
people?
it was, yes, definitely it was.
They did what they could, as one by one the injured were taken away.
And hearing over the radio that more ambulances were on their way, I think at that point is when I started at least to feel that, at least we were getting them out of there.
That was the first time I remember kind of taking a breath, is that the last victim was being loaded up into an ambulance, and then it was finally time to, it seems like it was kind of a blur in between there, but it was a chance to take a breath and look back and look at the balcony right up above us.
But even as the shifts finally ended and they left the scene, they couldn't leave what happened behind. And so they met the families, attended the memorials, did what they could to help.
I put myself in the shoes of theirs and like, okay, what if my parents was over here and I was in that casket? I mean, how would she feel?
It just reminds me that I'm also human, I'm also a person, and I also will feel certain emotions that everyone else does. And
it was okay to feel grief.
It was okay to feel grief and sadness and helplessness.
These officers say they grieved with the victims' families and found comfort in the gratitude shown to them by the Irish community.
As difficult as it was for us, I think all of us agree, we can't imagine what it was for the families.
It was a call that will always stay with them.
This is not going to go away.
When I drive past that building, it definitely comes back up.
But this is what they do.
It's part of our being, it's part of who we are, is to help people.
It's our job, and we're going to go out and we're going to do it the best we can, and that's what it is. So we don't need awards for it. We don't need to be recognized. We're going to go back out, we're going to take the next call. That's our job. That's what we signed up for.
The first responders and emergency workers there talking to Claudine Wong.
More so, as I said to you before, we seem to have the training we receive is more towards the patients that we actually look after, but very rare towards our actual colleagues and friends. And it is happening more so, I find. And you have to excuse me for not looking at you because I'm trying to be technical and look important here. Because like anything you do with electronics, you test it, and you test it, and you test it, and then it works. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks very much, and thanks Glen for the offer of coming here to speak to us today. It's great to see a part of all the courses given a bit on self-care, looking after one another. I got involved in this, I got involved with Dublin Fire Brigade in 1995. I got training from somebody I recognise in the audience here today. All those years ago, but it was only about 6 months later that I had the case that kind of turned my life in turmoil, that threw me up and down a little bit, and it involved children. I think we've all had one of those cases where we've come across and it's affected us deeply. Since then I got involved in the critical incident stress management team under my mentor Mark Bannigan many years ago, who subsequently died. He was the mentor that died for me, and I think I just have to mention him as a kind of memorial for this lecture here today. I took over the CISM team then in 2008 and have been coordinator ever since. I did a Master's in Bereavement Studies, degree in Counselling and Psychotherapy, and even today I was trained in Mental Health First Aid, which is a new course coming over from Australia at the moment. Death of a colleague and coping with the death of a colleague. I'm going to talk about a few theories and models about grief and what happens to us in those moments in the aftermath of the loss of a loved one. And I will mention love a bit in this, even though, especially now with Valentine's at the moment, but we do love our colleagues. We will look amongst our colleagues and we'll say no way, but we do have a love and deep love for our colleagues. Excellent. So that's the definition. A person with whom one works in a profession or business. And the synonyms, there's fellow worker, workmate, teammate, co-worker, associate, partner, collaborator, ally, comrade, companion, but none of them really show what a colleague in an emergency services or in voluntary services really means. I've got a few notes. It's the colleague who knows when to use black humour to alleviate the whole scene, and you know that yourselves. Knows when you're up or down, and knows to pick you up when you are down. Knows to, give you a pat on the back when you need it. Knows when to kind of grab you when you need to kind of pick up the pace a little bit more. We're joined at the hip with our colleagues by the trauma we see and the work we do in helping others. We talk a different language. We talk O2, we talk 15 litres per minute. We talk about SpO2, we talk about rhythms, ST elevation, rests, compressions. It's a different language to anyone outside our services. And because of that, we're joined. They know your look. You know that look of panic that you kind of give? This case is going a bit awry. They know that straight away. And they know to pick up the pace. They know to get your, support you in that when you need to make rapid decisions. And they're there and they got your back for it. They know when you're having a bad day. They're your pal, your bud, they're your mentor. They'll have certain areas that they're a little bit more equipped or a little more skilled on than you are. And vice versa, you'll be their mentor at times as well. And most of all, importantly, they've got your back, no matter what happens to you. So I'll go on and talk about the love aspect. And this is based on attachment theory. When a love tie is severed, a reaction, emotional and behavioural, is set in motion, which we call grief. But it's basically attachment. If we didn't have that love attachment for somebody, we wouldn't miss them after they're gone. When we have a relationship with a colleague in the station where all these ups and downs, all these experiences, these shared experiences are shared between the two of you, when they're gone, it leaves a void. Leaves a hole in your lives. And sometimes it's very hard for a group to pick that back up again. There's a lot of references at the back, and I'll go into it. So attachment theory is the grief is the price we pay for love. Without attachment, there would be no sense of loss. And attachment theory talks about the certain stages and phases that you go through as you deal with your grief. It talks about the shock and numbness in the early stages, the denial, not willing to accept, not wanting to accept the reality of the loss. Goes on to yearning and searching for that loved person and being close to objects, places that they were once part of, needing the station, needing the ambulance as a source of comfort. In those dark days in the immediate aftermath. Then they talk about a phase 3 of despair and disorganisation. Now, when we were all taught this years ago, we were taught about the stages of grief. Do you remember those? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the stages of grief. And they were kind of misinterpreted at the time. It was the stages of grief were about somebody who was dying themselves, and recognised stages about somebody that was dying themselves. The anger, the bargaining, the denial, the depression, then finally acceptance, and that's about somebody dying themselves. So the theories and models I'll talk about today will be more about what the grief does to us and how it affects us. And of course they talk about phase 4, reorganisation and recovery. It sounds so simple in black and white, doesn't it? Done. Straight through the sections. But of course the first couple of sections are extremely hard. And also they can be affected and compounded by a traumatic loss. When I talk about traumatic losses, I have had a line of duty death of a colleague. I have had a suicide of a colleague and dealt with the crews out in the aftermath. I have had sudden death while they were off duty, and the crews finding out, and usually finding out in dribs and drabs and not good information and bits and pieces, and that can just confuse us and confuse our initial. We have to experience the reality of the loss at the start, and I'll go into that in another theory just coming up. And also illness, a long illness where somebody's going to die at the end of it. That really affects us because we're fixers, we're helpers, and not being able to help the person we love can be quite hard at times. To sit back and watch somebody slowly die is extremely hard for us. So traumatic loss is painful. The more dependent you were to the person you lost, the more you may grieve, and the more sudden and unexpected your traumatic loss, the more you may be unprepared to deal with the aftermath. And trauma, if it is a line of duty death and you've seen the traumatic death that happened, sometimes you have to work on the trauma first. You have to get over the trauma that you saw, the images, the visuals, the sights, the sounds, the smells of the scene. You have to kind of deal with those before you can actually start dealing with the grief and loss. It means you're going to have to park the grief for a short while until you work with this stuff and get good support early on. Grief is a natural internal response to loss. Of course it is. It is universal, dynamic, invisible, genderless, ageless, non-linear, cumulative. It's experienced physically, mentally, psychologically, cognitively, socially and spiritually, and involves a continual process of adjustment. But trying to adjust to a new station without somebody filling the empty chair, to try and adjust to a new crew member that has to join you, to try and build up a new relationship in the aftermath of trying to deal with the loss of someone you love is quite hard. It's a personal process. Only you had the relationship you had with that colleague that's just died. Nobody else had that special relationship. Nobody else had those kind of looks that you shared. Nobody else kind of had the sense of humour that you shared together. Nobody else had those kind of ideals that you shared and the common things that brought you together. No one knew their family the way you did know their family. Nobody knew their life the way you did. And it's very personal. It's a very personal loss. The longer you're with a colleague side by side, the more you know their whole lives. In our job, there's 3 questions that are asked straight away as soon as you get on the ambulance. Who are you? Where are you from? What did you do before this? Basic questions. They're sounding you out as soon as you step into that ambulance. Your colleagues are sounding out where you're coming from, what's your ideas, what's your sense of humour, and we build up that relationship over a long period of time. And you just can't lose a relationship without feeling that and feeling for the loss. Grief is something we do, not something that is done to us. It was when we talked about the stages that were taught to us, the stages of grief, and there's great learning in those stages. But we were kind of taught, well, you have to go through the anger first, you have to go through the denial, you have to go through the bargaining, then you'll get to the depressive stage and you'll be down for a while, but you'll pick yourself back up. And we thought it all happened to us. But I'm afraid grief is something we do. We have to be active in grief. We have to kind of get ourselves to stop avoiding the places that we're avoiding, stop avoiding the conversations, talk openly about the person that we knew. Talk about the good side, the bad side, the funny stuff, the black humour, the negative stuff that sometimes came up that made him or her who they were as people. But talk about that stuff. It's an active process. Loss challenges our assumptions about life, and that's going to be on the next slide. I'm just going to talk about them in a couple of seconds. And it's the act of grieving is the act of making sense of the world again, because the world has changed. I know after some of my colleagues straight afterwards, they said the skies are a little bit greyer today. After David Bowie died, the skies were a little bit greyer. The music was gone to a certain degree for a short while, and compound that by the fact of knowing somebody so deeply. But it does an awful lot to our belief systems. We've got belief systems and values, behaviours, but at the core of it and at the cornerstone is our belief systems. We have belief systems, especially in our workplace, that we can control what we do. We're in charge. We know what we're doing. We're hands-on. We can start CPR. We're driving the ambulance to and from scenes. We have the hospital on standby. We're in control of our destiny. And because of that, life's predictable. The day will take the shape as we find it. Now, every case is new. There's always a new element every time we face one, and that's why we're drawn towards this work. There's an adrenaline rush to the whole work. But we still think that we're in control, and there's a predictability to our actions. And so every day we'll be in control, and every day we'll have good outcomes, bad outcomes. It's the way it happens. And because of that, we think life is permanent. Because we've got that control, because we have that predictability, even though we deal with death in the course of our work and in the course of our volunteer work, we still think that we are going to live forever. It's a deep ingrained belief. We know the reality is that somebody has to die, but we've got this kind of inner belief that we're going to be, well, old age before that happens to me. And we really believe that. So one of our loved ones in the station, our colleagues, suddenly dies. It rocks those worlds. I hope they're cheering for me. But it rocks those belief systems. It rocks the controllability. We're no longer in control. Life was just giving us a side swipe across the face and giving us a warning that we're not in control of what's happening. And therefore, life is not predictable. We really don't know what's going to come up next day. We're only in control of the moment right now. Taking that breath, relaxing. The next moments we're not in control of, and it's not predictable. That means our lives are not permanent. There is a chance we're not going to live forever. There is a chance now in our minds that life is going to be affected. Our life is going to be affected by something that will come out of left field that we're not expecting. And it rocks our foundations. And we need those foundations to be safe for the world. And a death of somebody we know kind of rocks that world a little bit. It takes a while to readjust. It takes a while to get the strength of that foundation back again, to take the control back. And that's why we have to be active in the grief. Be active. Embrace the rituals. Get involved in the death and the grieving process, because that will give us the control back and enable us to recover a lot quicker. Warden's task of grief, I have references at the end, but his first task of grief is to accept the reality of the loss. When someone dies, even if the death is expected, there is a sense that it hasn't happened. That denial, that yearning sometimes to keep the person close. The first task of grieving is to face the reality that the person is dead, that the person is gone. And anyone working in the services know breaking bad news is one of the hardest things we do. We've come up with documents to help us in our work that tell us how to break bad news and how to break it well and how to break it definitively. That the person is not confused that you're breaking the news to, that they know that definitively that their loved one is dead. You have to use those words. It has to be so they can accept the reality of the loss. That's the importance of breaking bad news well. To accept the reality of the loss immediately, because then you can go into the experience and the pain of the grief, and that's what we do in the station then, when we have to return to the station, because work expects you to get back to work, to get back in there, to get back volunteering. There's still people and events happening, and we need to get kind of back doing what we do so well, and it's very hard to do when you're missing a chair, or you're missing somebody, or you're missing your left arm sometimes. And that's what it feels like. So to experience the pain of the grief, many people try to avoid the painful feelings by various ways, such as being strong, moving away, avoiding painful thoughts, keeping busy, throwing ourselves into the work to distract ourselves. There's no adaptive way of avoiding it. You must allow yourself to experience and express your feelings. Anger, guilt, loneliness, anxiety and depression are among the feelings and experiences that are normal during this time. If we did bury it, and fellas, I have to blame the fellas an awful lot, that we do an awful lot of burying, pushing it down and getting on with our life and our day and distracting ourselves with the work. You're creating a pressure cooker. A pressure cooker that someday is going to erupt and it has to explode the air out. And that'll be maybe losing the head of someone you love, maybe losing the head of your new partner, maybe losing the head of the scene. But if you don't work with the grief, that pressure cooker is going to build, and that pressure is going to build up. You have to release every now and again. You have to look after yourself. Another model of grief is the dual process model, and the lines going zigzag in between is how we live through the time straight after the death. There's the left-hand side, which is the loss-orientated, the grief work, the yearning, the pining, the searching. Some of the denial is wrapped up in there. It's also the memories and holding on to those memories so tightly, so tightly with white knuckles, not letting the person go, focusing on the past. But also we oscillate back and forward, and we oscillate to the practical stuff of life. Otherwise, grieving people wouldn't get out of bed. They'd stay there. It's comfortable there. But no, there's the practical side of life that kind of takes over as well, and we oscillate back and forward. As Treby and Schutt, they're theorists, and they talked about us oscillating back and forward as we go through our grief. Now, there can be a maladaptive practices that if you avoid and keep yourself in the loss, you're going to hide yourself away from life, and life is continuing on around you. Or you distract yourself into work, but the loss and the pain stuff is still waiting there to grab you as well. So to keep oscillating, moving back and forward, to have the days which you're going to be not okay. It's definitely okay. It's definitely okay to be not okay. It's definitely to have those days where you kind of feel a bit tearful. It's okay to have those days when you meet somebody that reminds you of the one you've lost, and it just brings you down a few notches. It's okay to have those days. You have to have them. You have to have that pain, and then the practical side of re-engaging in life as you go move on through. And it's not easy. It's very, very hard. It's extremely hard. Sometimes you feel that you're just being thrown all over the place in the middle of a tempest, in a turmoil of a storm. We need to focus. Eventually you come out and you're kind of eventually focusing on the future, slowly but surely. That's why they say time heals, because you're oscillating slower and slower over time. So you feel like you're more into the present, more into the practical stuff, and you feel you're more into the past stuff as well. And then you get over the trauma that you may have seen over a line of duty death, and you get over the trauma and remember the good memories, the happy times, the jokes, the looks they used to give each other, the embarrassing moments. And you remember all those good memories, and they keep you sated. That's just another model of it. It's just maybe a little bit clearer. But this oscillation is what we're doing in the grief work. And we're working back and forward, and we're jumping back and forward as we go through life. And it's loss orientated versus restoration oriented work. We also got to talk about disenfranchised grief. This is by a fellow called Kenneth J. Doka. It's about grief that's not publicly acknowledged, not socially supported. Because who cares about their colleagues of the dead person? Sometimes it's only us, the group ourselves, that know the person so well, that feel the pain. The jobs expect us to fill the seats the next day. They expect us to man the ambulances. They expect us to come back. Okay, you have time for the ritual, but be back in your seat tomorrow. Let's get working again. Come on, let's pick it up. Whereas you're still feeling that pain for a long time in a group of people. And it's important to kind of note that for yourselves. Disenfranchised grief is grief that's not publicly acknowledged, not socially supported. It's affected by the way an individual grieves. The circumstances of the death, again, caught in trauma. You witnessed a traumatic death, or the death was extremely painful for the person that died, and we can get caught at that moment and caught in those visuals and those, listening and holding somebody's hand during those hard times. It's extremely hard. It's hard work. The griever is excluded. Sometimes you're pushed out. Can we have pipes and drums, and can we do a guard of honour? No, the family doesn't want that. Well, what do we do now? How do we grieve? And we're kind of pushed back, and it's the family's wishes. We've got to respect those, but then what do we do for ourselves? And we've got to be mindful of that. Maybe do something else. Maybe have a memorial in the station. Maybe have a memorial at his favourite place for ourselves as well. Mark it. Be very important that you mark it. The relationship is not recognised, and it could be that a couple dominates the grieving process for the next while after. We were his mates, we were his best mates, and the other people are kind of pushed back and forgotten about. But they had personal relationships with the one that's died as well. And it's important to not disenfranchise anybody. Include the whole group. Include everybody that knew the person. Make sure it's very inclusive. Just another thing about that oscillation as you go back forward through the loss. Nobody in the station is in the same place at the same time. So some of us will be caught up with the grief. Some of us will be practical. Come on, let's go, let's move on. Some of us will keep the grief stuff for at home, hidden away from everybody else. Nobody will ever be in the same place. That's why arguments sometimes erupt in the aftermath, and little things become big things, and because we're not understanding where we are. Some people grieve along these grievance styles. One's intuitive, that feeling-based, and very much the feeling-based griever who really feels the emotions and the pangs and the pain. The other one is instrumental. No, let's get on, let's get practical, let's get back to work. That's what he or she would have wanted. To see me back in the seat. Let's come on, let's get distracted. But let's do something. I want to do something hands-on. I want to do something to kind of memorialise them. Let's do something hands-on. Let's put a memorial in place. I want to be that kind of instrumental person. And we fit into categories. A lot of us are in the blended in the middle as we oscillate back and forward. But there is people as well that'll just be one way. Well, visibly one way. At home, it's a different kettle of fish, and we can be a little bit withdrawn and isolated. Grief work is exhausting, and it can be absolutely the fatigue from grieving for somebody for a day is just enormous. It's absolutely exhausting, and I can even feel as I talk about it, the weight of my legs trying to just move to get up and make something for myself for dinner. It's extremely hard, and that's why people need looking after these hard times. Few people realise that the work of grief takes a tremendous toll in psychological energy. This in turn affects our level of physical energy. We go through feelings such as sadness, anger, guilt and regret. The guilt and regret and the anger come really to the fore if it's a suicide of somebody we know. There's a lot of anger. Did you see it? Why didn't you see it? You were talking to him last. What did he say to you? Did he miss something? All those kind of questions erupt with the anger in the immediate aftermath. And of course, there's no real answers to those kind of things. Anxiety, shock, yearning, numbness. And some people will feel numb, and feel numb for days afterwards, until they start feeling. And it looks as if they don't feel anything for the person that's gone. It's just the way they're coping or the way they're affected. Fatigue, again, because it's exhausting work. It's very, very hard work. And the loneliness. It's lonely to be on an ambulance when your colleague is gone. and you've got somebody new sitting in the seat, and it's a very lonely seat to be in then. And you're trying to make small talk and just trying to connect, but it's, do you really want to? You need time, you need space. To change that position or change that person, you can't do it. No, never. Thoughts and behaviours that are affected are the disbelief, the confusion, can lead to dumbing down at the scene. You're there with a suction device, and how does this work again? Yeah, just because your frontal cortex is just taken up by all these thoughts, feelings, overwhelming thoughts that are going through your mind at the moment, and you've no space for the the normal stuff you used to remember. Preoccupied, thinking about the person you've lost, thinking about the station without him, sense of presence, I'm feeling a sense of a presence sometimes in the back of the ambulance, he's looking over you. I felt that from my mentor Mark when he died afterwards. I'd always look up and ask him, well, what do you think? Am I doing okay? What do you think of this lecture? Would that appease you? Would that keep you happy? Dreams about the deceased are very normal, extremely normal. You want to keep them close. In your mind, you want to keep them close as much as possible. Sleep disturbance, again, extremely normal. And it could be from anything from not being able to get to sleep in the first place to getting a couple of hours sleep, being fitful in your sleeps. But usually the sleep after grief is exhausting. You wake up tired. Even if you get 6 hours, you're absolutely tired because your mind is racing during the night as you try to process what's happened. And you process through your dreams. Your dreams are your processing of your previous 24 to 48 hours and going through and trying to work out, did this really happen? Is this real? You find yourself absent-minded behaviour. Again, this is due to confusion, withdrawal, avoidance of certain places, avoidance of work for a while sometimes. Have that on a Monday morning, no matter what's going on, but avoidance of those places that would bring the pain a little bit back. We're trying to avoid pain. But sometimes it's when you're in a good place, embrace it. And searching for the lost one in your life. Physical symptoms, difficulty going to sleep or waking in the middle of the night, weight loss or weight gain, and markedly so over a very short period of time. Low energy or fatigue, again, it's that kind of activation of your mind going non-stop, not getting the relaxation, and the pangs of grief are exhausting. Headaches, chest pain, racing heart, the feeling of palpitations, upset stomach or digestive problems, hair loss. Apparently it's a good sign, but it feels like that. It feels like going through the wave and going through this tumble dryer as you get through to the new life on the other side. It does feel like it takes a while to get through all that. And it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to have those days where you're just not on 100%. To give yourself that kind of space. Days you don't want to talk to others in the station, and days that you do. Tips to help with the grief work is good policies and good documents, especially in your workplace. Having a good breaking bad news policy. Having a good family liaison officer policy is very, very important to your organisations. Who goes and tells your family? Who tells the group of people? Who comes into the station and tells you all at once? Who tells you and tells you definitively? Are they trained in what they do as well? To get good, clear information, start your grieving process and start it off on the right foot. When it comes in dribs and drabs, you're confused, it feels traumatic. Or it's sudden news and it's a bit too sudden, and it can be traumatic in that way as well, and can stop you moving on through your grief. Allow your grief. Anticipate the difficult times as well. Anticipate when it's going to be difficult for you. Anticipate when you knew it was his birthday. Anticipate when you have to drive past his family and his home where you know so well. The local pub where you had all the fun, and going back there for their difficult times and difficult things to do. Express your grief, keep busy, add new activities and people, but slowly. I don't expect you to go out and just make friends with everyone and help me through this. No, but it takes slowly as you move on through your life. In a group of people, there's a need for mindfulness. Each one of you had a personal different relationship with the colleague that died, and none of you will be at the same place at the same time with your grief work either. Stay in touch with your support network and all the colleagues. Don't lose touch. And that's sometimes what happens when a group of people and they're all grieving at the wrong times. It kind of crumbles and it kind of falls apart, and a new group then builds up out of the ashes of that like a phoenix. To try and ensure that doesn't happen, make sure everyone's involved, make sure everyone's working with the grief. Join a support group and know the education that's out there. duty death that we've had in the last while, we've thrown out information sheets from the likes of the Irish Hospice, which give great information. If you know what's happening and awareness of what's happening and what would be affecting you, it does make it easier. Knowledge is the key. Exercise, eat well, sleep well, of course, you won't want to. And you'll have no interest in it, but sometimes you have to force yourself. Be willing to accept change. Know that healing takes time. Continuing bonds is very important. And as I said, for some people, having the memorial in the station or where you're all congregated is important. I know a couple of stations we've got stone helmets in one station, we've got a lamp and a little garden in another station. In another station we've got a garden with a few memorials now stamped on them because a couple of stations have been extremely unlucky over the last period of time. What doesn't help is avoiding or minimising emotions. As I said, pushing them down. Especially, I have to say, especially the blokes, pushing it down, try not to feel it. Do anything but to feel it, because you're creating a pressure cooker. It has to erupt. It has to explode everywhere and at some stage. And it'll always be to the ones that you love the most. Any fights at home, it's always between the two of you in the home place. Using alcohol or drugs to self-medicate, because it's only masking the symptoms. It's only hiding the symptoms. It's not allowing you to work freely. It's helping you escape. That's all it's doing. Using work to avoid feelings by distracting yourself and throwing yourself into the workplace and in the work you have to do. I know one fella, after one of the deaths was every case, he was pressing the button. Yeah, where am I? Well, hang on, take a turn. Relax, but trying to keep himself busy. Trying to throw himself into the kind of the most trying things I can say. I want them. Give it to me. Keeps me away from thinking about the mate I lost. Or avoiding the workplace and not wanting to come in, and avoiding the familiar places, the places you knew so well, the chairs you shared, the cups of teas you shared over the years. Jeez, we made so many friends over cups of teas in our jobs and in our volunteer services. Bereavement is choices. As I said, it takes away the predictability and the permanence of life, because you have no choice in the bereavement when it happens. But your grieving is not. And you can be extremely active in your grieving process. Again, look at the policy documents that are in your organisation. Will they be there to support you at the right time when it happens? It's important to have them in place. The workplace as well, the locker. If you've got a locker in work of the person you have lost, take your time over when the time is to move the locker, if at all. Depends on the person, the place. To clear out somebody's contents and to smear his face or his name off the wall of a locker, it's a big moment. And it should be done with kind of a lot of reverence and not be done by management and cleared into a box and off it goes. It should be done with a little bit of reverence and the group together. It's part of the ritual that we need to adhere to. There's my references. Some great quotes and some great learning in some of those. The death of a colleague leaves a hole, and it leaves a hole in your station. It leaves a hole in your camaraderie going forward. It's an empty chair. It's an empty driver's seat beside you. It's a co-crew affected, and a station in turmoil, and that's what it leaves behind. But it takes effort. It takes work as a group. Don't disenfranchise everybody. Involve everybody in the grief process, and over time it will end up a better place. Thanks very much for listening. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Adrian, for that. Just before you leave, there's a couple of tweets coming in. So Dr. David Menzies is looking in as well from where I'm unsure. So David, you're very welcome. So there's a conversation going between Groninger Ryan and Dave Menzies on Twitter at the minute. I think Adrian said before it's okay to box things off as long as you come back to them. So he just wants to get a bit of if you can just go into that a little bit.
There's certain times in our career where we're going to have to just park it for a minute and get on with the work at hand. Other people are depending on us. Other people are depending on us, especially at a scene or anything like that, to do what we have to do. But take note of it. Take a mental note of what happened to you in that moment that you felt something. Take a mental note of how you felt in that moment. Park it, and as soon as you get a bit of a breather time, okay, what was that about? You know, explore it. What was that about? Why did it come up for me? What was at that time that triggered that for me? What was the trigger? What set it off for me? Why did I recognise it? Did I recognise the person? Did he look like somebody I knew? Did he look like the person I lost? Was it something they said? Was it a comment or a phrase that are so common and he might have been picked up by somebody else? But always return to it and revisit it. Because at some stage we're hands on, we can't go, we can't lose ourselves, and sometimes we have to be hands on and do what we have to do. But note it and return to it. You definitely have to return to it, because if you don't return to it, it's gone. The moment is gone. There's great learning in that moment for you and your grief.
So excellent. I mean, the tweets coming in are very, very positive from some of the centres. Excellent talk. Old school. I think Dahi out there says old school, but I always find nothing beats a good cup of tea, a bun, and a chat with a good friend when dealing with grief. And I think from our perspective as rescuers, or attending people's houses at the lowest time that they're at, and they always turn and go, well, what do I do now? You've just told them a loved one has passed on or died. What do I do now? I think the best Irish answer and treatment to any of that is we'll just put the kettle on and we'll have a chat about it and see where we're going to go next. And there's nothing beats a cup of tea, I think, at the end of the day for anybody.
I'll just add to that, and stay around until you get their resources in place, their friends, their family, who they want to come. Ask them who they want now, because you might be inviting a family member who's not wanted. Who do they want to come and support them at this time? And when they're in place, then you can kind of blend away into the background. But until then, it's the cup of tea and the chat.
A friend of mine, Greg Prunty, has come in as well on Twitter and said, as a great man once said, hashtag dead as a wanker. The famous line from Dr. John Hines in his last presentation in SMAC, and it's one of the key notes that came out, no one would believe. Some of the other things that came out was resource wankers as well, so dead is bad. How we deal with that is very, very important, and I think a great talk. So Adrian, can I just say on my behalf, thanks very much for the bit of work you've done for me recently, and without you I don't think a lot of people could have got through it. So the tweets coming in is not only as in your role within DFB, but outside of that, and the numbers of gratitude and thanks coming in is huge. So I think we'll give Adrian another round of applause. So before we start the next speaker, I just want to play a little clip. One of our mottos here is hashtag inspire to be the best, and we look for inspirational people. I look for inspirational people to teach me or train me how to be a better medic, how to do my job much better, and how to become a better person as such. And a video clip and another radio piece I came past recently, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, was in relation to this brave girl here. She reminds me of a good few people, but I just want to bring her up here if I can. Some of you may be familiar with this clip, so just bear with me 1 second, and I'm going to play it for you now.
I don't know if I'm going to go to sleep tonight and wake up in the hospital tomorrow morning. I don't know if that's going to happen right now. Me getting through the week with 90 seizures, 100 seizures a week is how I live. Some days it won't just be 15 seizures, some days it will be 25 seizures. I'm very lucky that I don't have a reprieve. I don't need to go to bed, I'm not exhausted, I'm not sick after all of them. I get up straight afterwards and I can get on with life. I've had a lot of misunderstanding in public. People will stare, people will laugh, people will think I've maybe taken drugs. They just don't automatically assume it's a seizure, and I would love to make it known to everybody that there are so many different types, and maybe not to judge so quickly. Like, I think there was one situation on the Lewis, and the poor guy, I felt really terrible for him because he did look genuinely panicked, but I woke up and he was shoving a spoon in my mouth. I wasn't really sure how to respond to that, and I think a lot of people still do think you swallow your tongue during seizures, and it's a myth. You don't. I spent a lot of time in the hospital. A lot of it in a wheelchair. My kind of childhood almost just disappeared. From the age of 13 to 16, it was pretty much just cut out. I want to live a normal life. I go to school, I do my study, and I train for running. I had a goal to train for a marathon, which took about 9-10 months to train for. My mother freaked out when I told her about the idea. She was like, no, that's not happening. My neurologist, actually, who is a runner, said, why don't we do it together? And we did, and I think I had 5 seizures, and it was okay. I completed it. It's great that my mum understands and I'm just trying to make up time and I just want to be normal, and I appreciate her so much for that, like just giving me that bit of independence where I can go out and do the things I want to do. I find the gym so therapeutic. They were so calm about the seizures and everything, and like I'll go in now and just have chats with them, and I'll have a seizure and they'll like stay with me, and then they'll be like, all right, get back up, get back to class, get back to running, whatever I'm doing. I don't know what battles I'm gonna fight in the future. I don't know what my plan is or where I'm going. I do take my mom's advice on we live day to day. I'm so stubborn about normal life and getting out there and doing everything that anyone else is doing because I missed a good portion of that and I don't want to miss any more. I want to almost catch up, I suppose.
What do you say to that? I don't think everyone here can go out and run a marathon. Some people do. Some people don't let their conditions get them down. Some people don't let the medical conditions stop them from doing anything. But inspirational people are very few and far between these days, and I think when we find them, it's always nice to let the rest of the world know they are out there. So do look for those people in your career and your jobs that will help to inspire you to be the best, because that's what FOMED is all about. So just bear with me for 2 seconds and I'll try and get this next piece up. Sorry about next door. Adrian, you couldn't have picked a better time to give a talk on grief, and it seems to be like a bit of an election rally going on in the room next door, and they're giving off free drink as well, which kind of adds to that also. So yeah, we're heading there next year. I think I couldn't provide free drink, but I'll try and rob theirs. Anyway, thanks very much. So our next speaker is me. So I sat down a few months ago and said I have this bit of an idea in my head, and who can I get to come in and speak? And I asked 1 or 2 people, and unfortunately they weren't available. So I said, feck it, I'll just try and do it myself and give you my approach to this. And I've just given the heading to the topic, some light reading to make us all think. So I need to let you know some very important people, because without these 2 people, this wouldn't happen. Because Danny, you never see Danny, and that's Danny there, because he's always behind the camera, okay? And all the certs, and all the emails, and everything you get, and all the responses comes from Gráinne Ryan. She used to sign them me, and everyone would come back to Glen, but I think she deserves a bit of credit now at this stage. So, they're OBI CBC, and this is Bill. So, how do you follow up a talk on death? In other words, bring a stick figure man into the whole concept of what the next talk is going to be about. So this is Bill, and Bill has been very, very famous on Facebook and different aspects of social media. And one day, Bill had a day of Netflix and was watching episodes of firefighters and paramedics back to back. Bill decided that he wanted to go off and be one of these heroes that he's seen on the television. He joined his local CF4 group and became a responder. And he did respond to many cardiac arrests, many chest pains in his area. And one day, Bill seen an ambulance going by and said, well, why can't I do that? So Bill went off and he joined National Ambulance Service. And when he did, he started to read a little bit. Okay, he wanted to try and get his knowledge up and see how he was going to do, and because he wanted to be the best that he could. So Bill used to read the Daily Mail when he started in his career as a junior paramedic, or sort of trainee paramedic. And he read such things as the Daily Mail, all right? And he read things like, just 1 drink a day is too much, have a Friday night cup of tea instead. A health chief attacked, this is an actual headline from the paper itself. Health chief attacked over the nanny state alcohol guide that says a single glass of wine a day raises cancer risk, right? Following day, Bill went in to get trained, and on his way and down to get the Lewis, he picks up his Daily Mail and then sees this. How wine can help you lose weight. It defies conventional wisdom, but some women insist a nightly glass of red wine keeps them slim. And experts now say they might be right. Bill got very, very confused. What's right and what's wrong, you know? And every single week, you will be told in the Daily Mail's health article, and you can log on to this, that something is good for you, and the following week, it's bad for you, and everything will give you cancer. That's what it says, nearly every single week. So Bill didn't know what to do, and again, his career in the ambulance service was progressing, and he didn't know You know, what's right, what's wrong. Every year they trained him on CPR. Every 2 or 3 years he had to recertify. And 1 minute it was 15-2 and 5-1. It was Holger Nielsen. Some of the people in this room remember Holger Nielsen and bellows and different things. And we used to do CPR by pressing on people's backs and then bringing their arms up behind them like a chicken. Apparently this helped them. And then we eventually got to 3 sections in a row, or every 3 periods of 5 years, where the research came out that 30-2 is the best way to do CPR. But why have we moved from ABC to CAB? This is what was getting to Bill. Bill didn't know why we were doing all these changes and why it was changing every 2 to 3 years. And realistically, it came down to this. And this is the evidence that was carried out over the 5-year period, okay? And it's done by the American Heart Association, European Resuscitation Council, and other bodies who get involved in research over that period that tells us what's working and tells us what's not. And then they publish it. And it's published here in the Elsevier magazine. Okay, so this is the European Resuscitation Council's guidelines. This is all the evidence that they came up with, which identifies why we do what we do. But it can get a bit boring reading those massive big papers. You know, it really can when you kind of publish it. You can download 10 or 11 different chapters of the actual resuscitation guidelines to get to that one thing you want to know. But this intrigued Bill. Finally, he was able to get an answer. We weren't just walking into a classroom and told, this is what you do. Bill started to get a taste of why he was doing what he had to do. Alongside that comes clinical practice guidelines, which changes every 2 years. And some of you may not be aware, obviously, from the clinical practice guideline, but at the base of the clinical practice guideline is where the reference for the information comes from, okay? Which is here. Okay, this here, the reference ILCOR Guidelines 2010 is where FEC have got the research to issue their guideline for VF and pulses VT in an adult. And most of the CPGs that we work off will have a link at the end of the page to identify where the evidence comes from. So if you have a CPG or some form of treatment within a CPG that you think could be changed or should be changed, there's the evidence of where it came from. Go look at it and see if that changes your mind in what you want to do. And UL, University of Limerick, who are also linking in tonight to us, okay, there's a group down in UL watching in, they do 2 things. They promote the feedback and they give this website here, www.ul.ie CPR forum, and that's a link or an ability for you to feed back to FEC your thoughts on the CPGs, if they're working, if they're not working, okay, and that's something that we're very unique in having. As paramedics, advanced paramedics, EMTs, professionals with a registry involved in pre-hospital care, we have a voice and we have the ability to feed back in our future and how we do our work and how we do our business. And it's through things like the UL set up here, the CPR forum, or the CPG forum, should I say, that allows us to be able to give that positive feedback. This box on the right here, some of you may not see, but some of the names I'll read out to you. Kevin Redington, Advanced Paramedic, Dublin Fire Brigade. Barbara Shinners, Emergency Medical Technician, Order of Malta. I'm not sure who Dermot Smith is, but he's a consultant endocrinologist. Dr. Alan Watts, who joins us in the room, who just walked into the left-hand side here. SPR in Emergency Medicine. Professor Peter Weedle and Mr. Brendan Whelan, an Advanced Paramedic in the Midlands. There's a whole list of names of people who, on the actual development of the CPG, and Brian Power from FEC does a lot of work on that. So Brian develops the CPGs and he puts them out there and sees how people do. These people fed back into the system to identify what their level should be doing and what they thought of the CPGs itself. And that's what drives the CPGs, that's what changes it, that's what develops them. Okay? Here's another one. Good evidence supported change. So this was the oxygen administration aspect, which became in the last 2 years, which still people find it very, very difficult to get their head around. We have a titration rate. When I became an EMT in 1998, everybody got oxygen. The key was, and through Northeastern University, was, sure, it's in the air, it's not going to harm you. Give it to them. And Dublin Fire Brigades have been involved at that stage. Their purchase of non-rebreather masks went through the roof because why do we need nasal cannula? Why do we need or standard face masks? Everybody was getting 100% non-rebreather. Sure, it has to be good for them. They're having a cardiac arrest. It has to be good for them. Okay? But then all of a sudden it changed. And we were given these guidelines. So, and again, they're guidelines, 88% to 92% for patients with COPD. Okay, that's our titration rate. We're in between those rates, they're good. And for people who are non-COPD patients, we're looking at 94 to 98%, or 96%, should I say. Okay, so they're the guidelines. But where did that come from? How has that come about? From evidence. Okay, Resuscitation, the magazine itself, or the publication itself, published that through circulation in the bottom left-hand side there. Okay, they done a study. So a study was carried out, and a link into this was also the British Thoracic Society in 2008 done a study. But in this particular study, what they said was air versus oxygen in an ST segment elevation MI. Now, I'm not as intelligent as a lot of people of you in this room, so I'm not going to remember the actual information that came from it. But I'll read you a little bit from it, okay? They conducted a multi-centre, prospective randomised control trial comparing 8 litres per minute with no supplemental oxygen in patients with an ST elevation myocardial infarction, which was diagnosed by the paramedic, so it's pre-hospital, on the 12-lead ECG. Of 638 patients, that's a big number of patients, okay? 638 patients, they were randomised, so they weren't just, it wasn't we're going to do all you, so it was you and then we might do you. There was some system in place to choose who they were going to give the oxygen to. 441 patients had confirmed ST elevation myocardial infarction, so STEMI as we call it for short, and they underwent primary endpoint analysis. Now here's the important bit. There was an increase in the rate of recurrent MI. So it happened again, basically. The increase of recurrent myocardial infarction in the oxygen group compared with the no oxygen group. And there's figures given like 5.5% and p-values, and it goes into statistics and stuff. And some of you who are at advanced paramedic level and paramedic level, you attend courses to show you how to evaluate these papers, read these papers, and get the information from the paper that shows you whether it's good evidence or it's bad evidence. And University of Limerick every year runs courses. They're a one-day course, they're an absolutely excellent course. I had to do it twice because it didn't go in the first time and I went back down the second time. But it shows you how to take a paper and properly look at it and see if the evidence is good, bad, or if it wants to change your practice. So, at 6 months, the oxygen group had an increase in myocardial infarction size on a cardiac magnetic resonance. Now that's double Dutch to some people. The conclusion was, from this evidence, that supplemental oxygen therapy in patients with ST elevation MI but without hypoxia may increase early myocardial infarction and was associated with a larger myocardial infarct size assessed at 6 months. But you're having a heart attack. Get oxygen into him. It's dying. It's not. It's doing damage. So this is evidence that led to a number of other pieces of evidence, especially from the British Thoracic Society, of how by giving or over-oxygenating patients, we were actually doing them harm. And I found it from when this evidence started to come out, we were starting to go into hospitals and we had MIs and we had seizures and we had certain conditions and there was no oxygen on them. Well, Jesus, we were nearly getting thrown back out of the hospital. Who are you? You get oxygen on them, you can't be doing it. But the change is coming. The evidence, 2008, the British Thoracic Society released guidelines on oxygen therapy for patients that gave these titration marks in them. Okay. So, Bill read this and Bill felt good. Bill changed his life. Bill became involved in things like social media. He started to listen to the podcast from SMAC. International experts from all around the world. SMAC stands for Social Media and Critical Care. It's a huge medical conference that's coming to Dublin this year. Tickets are like gold dust. Some of the speakers are fantastic. And newer voices are starting to come to the forefront on evidence that's been proven time and time again in other parts of the world. And a lot of this evidence is based around pre-hospital care. Okay, these speakers want to talk about pre-hospital care, which all of us are involved in this room. Bill found Twitter, linked into Twitter, started to follow people like SMAC, like Monday night's Irish EMS chats. 9 o'clock every Monday night on Twitter, a conversation takes place called #Irish EMS chats. And pre-hospital care providers from around the country of Ireland discuss topics. They raise topics and they discuss them and they talk about them. So that's our own community. Bill became part of that community. He started to tweet, started to get involved and started to get information from them. Bill attended the EMS gathering, huge big conference which is happening every 2 years now in Killarney, where there's a mix of education through learning through the environment that we learn in. Ben Heron, sitting in the audience tonight, gave an excellent piece 2 years ago on the mountain, and he's going to come here hopefully on April the 13th, which is the next session, and bring that session to this room here, where we can adapt the principles of mountain rescue on the side of a cliffside, take those principles and put them to a 16-year-old female who's just drank a naggin of vodka and is found by a passerby in a ditch at 4 o'clock in the morning. Somebody's cold and injured. It's the same principles. So that's why we get people like Ben and other Mike Abernathy. We've got Kieran Henry, Professor Cusack, Professor Bury, other big names in Irish pre-hospital care. They speak at the EMS gathering. And people from international speakers come as well to talk at the gathering. And that's why I wear this T-shirt. Because we need to pay it attention. We need to go to these things and see these events because we will learn so much from them, like Bill did. And then we have the reading aspect. I know from my organisation, every 2 months we get a copy of the Paramedical Journal of Practice. Okay? It's delivered to the station free of charge. FEC has paid for that. I don't know, Christy, do you get that in the ambulance stations as well? Or no? So FEC have do you get it, do you? So some stations actually get this, the Journal of Paramedic Practice. It's an excellent read. Our colleagues in the UK have put together a publication and are printing and publishing their evidence from what they're learning pre-hospitally in the UK. Okay? And thankfully now, through Alan Batt, I don't know where many of you are on Twitter and follow Alan. Alan's an Irish expat. He wanted to link in today, but he's starting a new job in Australia, I believe. Alan is and through the Irish College of Paramedics as well, through CHEYNE and stuff, is getting involved with the Irish Journal of Paramedicine, which our first edition should be coming out, I think, in June or July this year. So they're looking for people to publish. They're looking for people to put in their evidence or their publications to them. Great for us. Absolutely great. As a profession of pre-hospital care providers, we have our own Journal of Medicine now, where we have the platform to publish what we're doing and if it's working or not. Okay? So Bill was delighted with himself. So Smiley was talking one day. Bill was having a conversation with a couple of his friends, feeling very, very confident about himself and the evidence he had just read up about. Okay? And the discussion started to take place between supraglottic airways over endotracheal intubation. Bill had now progressed to an advanced paramedic. And there was paramedics and EMTs in this discussion group that was going on outside the ambulance station. And one paramedic turned around and said, "Why do we need APs to intubate? So supraglottic airways are as good. I follow SMAC, I follow Twitter, I follow all these bits and pieces." And he produced 2 bits of evidence to say that they were better. The first one is a paper from the Association of Pre-Hospital Advanced Airway Management with neurological outcome and survival in patients with an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. It was published in JAMA, the Journal of Ben, help me out here, JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. Thank you very much. Okay, and it was published in 2013. Okay, and then there was the second paper as well, assessing the impact of pre-hospital intubation on survival in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. Pre-hospital emergency care was the magazine. It was printed in 2011. 2 fairly distinguished good publications. Okay, what were they about? The first paper, in an adult advanced cardiac life support in 2015, the American Heart Association guidelines update for cardiopulmonary resuscitation and emergency cardiovascular. They also published in the 2015 guidelines in relation to this issue. They spoke about this issue, supraglottic airway over intubation. And what they said was there was no difference. They didn't choose one over the other between a bag valve mask or actually intubating or using an advanced airway. But don't let it delay you getting back on the chest. The evidence from 2013, the first paper there, the outcome the authors attempted to investigate is an important one. For while we often focus on obtaining a return of spontaneous circulation on scene, survival to hospital discharge, neurologically intact, should be our primary goal. Okay, so you can have all your fancy drugs, your drills, your highfalutin care and attention, but your CFR is equally as important as your doctor on scene. Because without good CPR, good hands-on, everybody is saying the patient outcome is going to be reduced. Okay. Yes, we bring extra things to the party, and the evidence shows that. A study enrolled 281,000 patients. Okay, 281522 in an advanced airway management only group, of which 41,972 received an endotracheal intubation tube. So huge numbers involved in the study, but only 41,972 patients received an ET tube, and 239,550 received a supraglottic airway. Okay, 367,000. Are you all familiar with supraglottic airway? We're all happy with that. Good. So 367,000 patients in the BVM only. They only got BVM. They got no advanced care. These are massive, massive numbers that were involved in this study. done over a long time, and it was done in Japan as well, I believe, where the evidence actually comes from. While the authors do discuss the incidence of cardiac arrest in the United States at the beginning of the article, it is important to note that the data was gathered retrospectively from a database in Japan. Okay? The EMS system described by the authors is vastly different from the US EMS system. The statistical analysis of the data gathered in this study found that CPR with an advanced airway management was a significant predictor to poor neurological outcome. Huge evidence this paramedic was thrown at Bill. Bill was lost when all his figures and stuff. How your man remembered it, I don't know. But anyway, he started having a go at Bill of it. The outcome was not easily generalised, for it was focused on data and a provider in Japan. The authors of the study note several limitations, including patients that were not successfully intubated and thus managed with a BVM being grouped into BVM-only patients. Okay? So every paper can stand up, any paper can stand up and say, we do this and this is really, really good and these are our figures, but you're always going to be able to look at it differently and take different types of figures out of it. That paper's about, I think it's about 10 pages long, it's fairly big, the evidence in it is huge. But to me, they're the key things out of it. But they did say that supraglottic airway patients had a better neurological outcome over ET patients. Okay? The second paper, assessing the impact of pre-hospital intubation. Okay? Now this is taken from JEMS, Journal of Emergency Medicine. They recently printed these 3 papers in regards to supraglottic airways. The study was a retrospective analysis with the data gathered from a single EMS system, again pre-hospital in North Carolina, and researchers enrolled 1,142 cardiac patients, with 203 patients receiving no intubation attempt, with the remaining receiving at least one intubation attempt. The authors of this study, like the previous studies, found a significant increase in the likelihood to survive hospital discharge with no intubation. Like the previous mentioned study, this study is also limited by the percentage of participants who did not receive at least one intubation attempt. Okay? Again, evidence was shown towards the patient who received the supraglottic airway over an intubated patient had a better chance of survival from pre-hospital to after cardiac arrest. What does Bill do? I'm an advanced paramedic, postgraduate diploma, I'm thinking about doing my master's. What am I going to do? So Bill goes off and finds evidence to go on the other side of it. Endotracheal intubation versus supraglottic airway insertion in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest was printed in Resuscitation, high leading publication. In 2012, this article was published. He also found a second article, Airway Management and Out-of-Hospital Cardiac Arrest Outcome in the CARES Registry. It was published in 2014, very, very recent. Okay? It was May, and it was again published in Resuscitation. Again, a very, very highly respected publication that gives good evidence. What did happen? In the first paper there, the top one in the tracker on the right there, it said, we performed a secondary analysis of data from the Multi-Centre Resuscitation Outcomes Consortium, which is ROC, and they have an excellent website where you can log on to and see the different types of trials that's going on. And they're doing a really, really good one. All pre-hospital stuff in the States at the moment, alongside CRASH 3, which is looking at the effects and benefits of tranexamic acid in a head injury. All right, they're doing their own trial as well as CRASH 3 happening. So good information coming pre-hospital there. So, what did they study? They studied adult, non-traumatic, out-of-hospital cardiac arrest receiving successful supraglottic airway insertion using a King LT, combi tube, or an LMA. So King LT is one of the supraglottic airways the National Ambulance Service is using at the moment. Okay, it's like if you aren't familiar with it, it's like an ET tube with 2 cuffs, one at the end, okay, the very bottom of it, and one halfway up, and it's a supraglottic airway. So, or successful endotracheal intubation. The primary outcome was survival to hospital discharge. So what they were looking at was the amount of people that survived to discharge hospital with a satisfactory functional status. Now, 10,455 adults that were in this study, out of hospital cardiac arrest. 8,487, which was about 81%, received an endotracheal intubation. And 1,968, which is about 18% of them, received supraglottic airway. Survival to hospital discharge with satisfactory functional status was, in the endotracheal group, 4.7%, and in the supraglottic airway, 3.9%. So a higher percentage showing endotracheal intubation actually worked better between these big groups. Bill felt good. This was 2 fingers up to this man telling him he hadn't got a clue what he was doing. Okay? And then he went on to the second study here. They studied adult out-of-hospital cardiac arrest in the cardiac arrest registry to enhance survival, which was the CARES registry, and primary exposure where endotracheal intubation, supraglottic airway, or no advanced pre-hospital airway place primary outcomes were sustained with a ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation. Survival to hospital admission, survival to hospital discharge, and neurologically intact survival to hospital discharge. That's what we're aiming for. Okay? So they had 2 groups. They had the first group, which was endotracheal versus supraglottic airway, and then they had a second group, which was no advanced airway versus endotracheal or supraglottic airway. So we had ET over LMA was in one group they looked at, and the second group they looked at was ET LMA versus nothing. Okay, and this is what the evidence came up with. Compared with the supraglottic airway, endotracheal intubation achieved higher sustained return of spontaneous circulation and hospital discharge with good neurological outcome. Again, Bill was able to say ET is better. He had the facts and figures, he had the evidence to prove it. But the other guy in the conversation also said, I've read that paper. And what that paper also says is compared with ET and or supraglottic airway, the patients who received no advanced airway attained higher survival to hospital administration, hospital survival and hospital discharge with good neurological outcome. So when nothing was done, good CPR, OPA, bag valve mask, it actually showed a better outcome for the patient over advanced airway practice. So everybody was confused in the group now. Goes back to the point. Good CPR, good mouth-to-mouth, good bag valve, good OPA, good airway is going to lead to good outcomes. And yes, some patients will benefit from supraglottic airway over endotracheal intubation. But the amount of evidence that's out there to support what we do is huge. It's for you to find out what works and what doesn't work and prove it. Publish it. Write it down. Try and get to your local hospital group if you can, or any organisation you can where they have things like journal clubs, where doctors will actually come in and facilitate night around discussions similar to what we're doing here, around pre-hospital care. Okay. Bill's head was wrecked. It was coming from all angles. Everything. You were telling me one thing, you were telling me another thing. I just don't know what to do. It doesn't matter, Bill. That's what you do. No matter what you know, no matter who you are, what you're told, these are your pre-hospital guidelines. We'll do the evidence for you, and we'll tell you what you have to do. Okay? But if you do not like it, what are you going to do? This is not going to get you in trouble. Listening to a man that's able to open somebody's neck with a big pen and a half a razor will get you in trouble. Okay? But it's done and it works. What's the evidence for it? So, what does Bill have to know? Each of you, as a pre-hospital care provider, be it at EMT, paramedic, advanced paramedic level, you have representation at committee level, at council level, at medical advisory group level on the Pre-Hospital Emergency Care Council. Your representatives are people like Joe Mooney from the Order of Malta, Dr. Jack Collins, okay, also involved on an EMT level at the Order of Malta. From a paramedic representative, Rory Previtt and Derek Rooney. Okay, and an advanced paramedic, Ken O'Dwyer and Dave O'Connor. And I know myself, Dave O'Connor attends these meetings and he emails his minutes from those meetings to people to let me know what's coming down the line. Because if something is discussed and I know about it, I can go off and I can research it. And I can see if it's good. Or I can add to it and say, that medication is good, but maybe we can do it differently. There's a study going on in the UK at the moment. So recently we've got cardioversion at AP level. There's a study going on about the Valsalva manoeuvre in the UK, which is showing higher percentage of changes in the rhythm itself, from an SVT rhythm, if you raise the legs of the patient after the Valsalva. And it's showing higher percentage outcome. The evidence isn't fully published yet. The research isn't fully completed as far as I'm aware the last time I checked. But it is showing better outcomes from an SVT if after you do the Valsalva you lie them down and raise the legs up into the air. Okay? And there's a video showing that, and that's all on social media and critical care, that you can get a video to show you how to do this as well. All right. So, what's happening? So the Medical Advisory Committee puts all this together. What does Bill do? Well, Bill can attend UCD SEMS. He can do his Masters in Emergency Medicine Service. He can go on and better himself and get a master here in Ireland. He could attend University of Limerick and complete his degree or Bachelor's of Science in Paramedic Studies at Practitioner Entry. He can go and do that if he wants to. He can now read the Journal of Paramedic Practice and make decisions on the evidence that's coming through from there to see if it works in his practice or not. Again, the Irish Journal of Paramedicine, the first publication, July 2016. He can attend 2016 gathering, and he can also attend Respond, a huge conference happening this year in Mullingar, from CF4 groups all around the country come together and get educated and talk about what they're doing. CF4 groups they're huge in the country. The amount of AED programs going on in the country is massive, and led by great doctors like Dave Menzies, Jason Horan, Jason Van der Veld, Sean, the couple of doctors in Cork that are involved down there as well, and other doctors around the country. Okay? So Bill can actually publish, submit, research, read and discuss, and that will make him become a stronger professional medical practitioner. And that's what Bill wants to do. But then came Jill. Always a woman, isn't there? So Jill had a discussion with Bill one night, and they were talking about what's all this evidence and this research and stuff, and Bill said, look, I've seen this thing didn't write FOAMed on Twitter, and I got involved, and it was inspirational, and it led me to go off and research and stuff, and it led me to say there's nothing too small or too different to research. If you want to research something, you have a question in your head and you want to research that question, go do it. Find a way to do it and see if that answer is out there. So Jill turned to Bill, and Jill said, I heard a story about out-of-body experiences. And I've heard a story about during resuscitation that patients have actually reported levitating above the bed, looking down on the medical professionals carrying out CPR. And Bill laughed. But Jill didn't. And Jill researched. And she found this paper. It was the Awareness During Resuscitation, a prospective study. And I heard about this in 2011 at the Resus conference in Limerick. And the guy who was carrying out the research actually gave the presentation. And he told us what they did was, in a part of the Resus room, they put a picture of a cartoon character and told nobody. And after the cardiac arrest, they actually went back to the patients who said they had this out-of-body experience. And they questioned them, they interviewed them and said, did you see anything? Guess what the figure was on the piece of paper? Who's the most high-profile cartoon character in the world today? No. Who? No. Bart Simpson. He had a picture of Bart Simpson on top of one of the lights in the resuscitation room. And if that person, because nobody knew it was in the room, if that person actually said they seen the picture of Bart Simpson, then the evidence was showing, yes, this actually happens. So what was the evidence? The incidence and validity of the aware, and it was printed and published in Resuscitation, a highly respected publication when it comes to evidence. The incidence of validity and awareness, together with the range of characteristics and themes related to memories, cognitive processes during cardiac arrest, was investigated through a 4-year multi-centre observational study using a 3-stage quantitative and qualitative interview system. They actually had enrolled 2,060 patients in this study. So there's 2,060 cardiac events. 140 survivors completed stage 1 interviews, while 101 of 140 patients completed the stage 2 interviews. 46% had memories with 7 major cognitive themes: fear, animal, plants, bright lights, violence, persecution, deja vu, family, recalling evidence post-cardiac arrest, and 9% had near-death experiences, while 2% described awareness with explicit recall of seeing and hearing actual events related to the resuscitation. 1 had a verifiable period of consciousness awareness during the time cerebral function had not expected, so it was basically they were dead and they could actually recall stuff. But guess what? Nobody's seeing Bart Simpson. Okay, so Jill got the answer to her question. The evidence was there, 2-year study, 2,060 cardiac arrests, 141 patients were interviewed. It was researched, it was published. So there's the answer to the question. Do I want any of you to do that? No. The future for both Bill and Jill looks bright. While researching this, I came across an article of the birth of pre-hospital care in America, and again was published through GEMS. And while reading the conclusion of the actual piece by the author, who was Dennis Eagerly, who's an EMT paramedic, it was printed in the Journal of Emergency Medical Service in October 2013. There was a piece I thought was very fitting for this talk tonight, and it reads as follows. Evidence-based medicine is changing how we think about the practice of medicine in general, and pre-hospital medicine is not exempt. We are no longer doing skills or providing treatment because we believe that skill or intervention to be cool or sexy. Patient care needs to be vested in what is proven to make a difference in patient outcome. Patient outcome is key. This process is a large driving force in paramedic education. Much of what we do, and I expand that to paramedic education, it's a US term, but I expand that to EMTs, EFRs, advanced paramedics, all the levels that we've seen on the board earlier on. This process is a large driving force in paramedic education. Much of what we do, including spinal immobilization and endotracheal intubation, is being evaluated. Going aside for a second, we had an incident in the UK, or a situation in the UK, where the governing body over there, JR Calc, wanted to remove intubation from paramedic level because the evidence they were reading was showing that the lack of exposure from the paramedics in the UK to carry out intubations, they actually weren't getting, it was unsuccessful. The College of Paramedics in the UK came back with a counter-argument with that. So their own body fought the case for them, and they were successful. So paramedics in the UK are still intubating. But it's still under scrutiny. This process is a large driving force in paramedic education, including spinal mobilisation, endotracheal intubation is being evaluated. Paramedic programs will serve as advocates to the advancement of evidence-based medicine. Paramedic graduates must know how to not only read and interpret research, but they must understand the basis by which a research study is established. As medical professionals associated with a body, we are extremely lucky that we set the future for our profession. Okay? We have the influence to change it through evidence-based medicine. And the more events like we do here through FOMED, and the more things that our professionals, our practitioners get involved with, then you will see the evidence change in the country. Thank you. Normally at this time I stand here and I kind of ask questions that's come in on Twitter. Dan finds up above there. Any questions you have there, Dan? Statements. Okay, give us some statements then. Who? She's a woman, yeah, she's never wrong. She got the answer to her question. Any questions coming in at all? Anyone in the audience have any questions?
It's incredible to see with CPR just in the lecture there that people who have an out-of-body experience are actually going 2 foot less.
Because Bart was only that size, yeah. But that's a true story. He actually did have a picture. He had a photocopy, coloured photocopy of Bart Simpson on top of one of the lights. And that was his key to identify that the research was valid. If somebody came back and said they'd seen the Bart Simpson. Okay.
I've one there from Alan Back.
Yep.
Thanks for the Irish Day very much. Shout out. Ellis, the new job is in Canada, so you gave my wife
Canada.
Right.
Sorry, Alan. So big tip. Alan's very, very pro with regards of Irish EMS chats, and even though he's overseas, he's still very involved in Irish EMS here as well. Alan, do you want to come along? So our final discussion tonight is from Dr. Alan Watts. Some of you may know Alan. Some of you may not. People want to pee. Yep.
A question there from Sinead Raymond.
Oh yeah.
Also, no CPR for traumatic cardiac arrest.
No, that's the question. No CPR for traumatic cardiac arrest. The jury is out. Evidence has shown that with successful outcomes in the UK HEM service, that if advanced life support, i.e. from a senior level, i.e. a medical practitioner level, is present, that can actually start with fluids, blood, oxygen, so blood over fluids, possible thoracotomies. They have shown and proven good evidence of successful outcomes from traumatic cardiac arrests. But those big skills, those major interventions have to be available to show those outcomes. But it is recommended, unless you have them, that CPR should not be carried out, because what are you actually circulating? But I would never stand over that. I have no evidence in front of me now to say that that's good or bad. So what I'd say to you is, if you feel that's a question that actually stands out, should you be doing chest compressions to somebody who's bleeding out, go away and look at the evidence, but follow your clinical practice guideline, because as far as I'm aware, under none of the CPGs, it says do not carry out CPR in a traumatic cardiac arrest, unless there are signs of death, incompatible life. Okay?
Okay. On that, Glen, the military, the UK military coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq, they've issued some great guidelines recently in relation to traumatic cardiac arrest. And it would turn the practice that we're currently doing on its head.
Is which?
It turns
okay.
what we're currently doing on its head.
Right. I think needs.
They don't go with adrenaline and pop because they're saying basically the patient's so vasoconstricted anyway.
Okay.
That adrenaline doesn't.
Yes.
But you're not going to take that out of the CPG for a while.
No, and I know there is a trial going on in the UK looking at adrenaline use in cardiac arrests. It's a very debatable topic because nobody's willing to take it on. The UK have taken it on, whether it is good of benefit or not. So yeah, where we've come from is the military medicine, and they will lead the future. So what we're looking at. So, thanks, Ben. Okay, Alan. This is for your sound.
You people need a break.
Does anyone want to use the toilet while Alan gets set up? Take 5 minutes. I'm going to check the Twitter. I've no tea and coffee tonight because this is the Royal College of Surgeons and they don't generally give out tea and coffee. But it seems they're giving out free Heineken next door. So, yeah, nothing to do with me.
Well, if you're going to the bathroom, come back.
What are you looking to do? Power, yeah. So this is me. You can take this one. That was,
What's I guess he's gone. So the one who's a current AP student is Steve or Scott?
Stephen White.
Okay. And the other one is Paul. The one that's studying him right now is Paul. Right hand side.
Yeah. Yes.
And who's the I'll start the clip. That'll. What about this one? Oh yeah.
Mein Name ist Mark. Ich habe 2012 meinen besten Freund Martin im Alter von 41 Jahren durch eine Sepsis verloren.
Ni Luba. Na damu da rashin 'yata Zainab, 'yar kwana 5 dalilin cutar mugunyar jini watanni 7 da suka huce.
Меня зовут Игорь. Моя сестра Анна умерла от сепсиса, который явился результатом пневмонии. Ей было 58 лет.
Meu nome é Maria. Em 2012 perdi meu marido, Leolário, de sepsis.
सुमन के पापा सेप्सिस के कारण चल बसे जब
मैं पापा को बहुत मिस करती हूँ.
My name is Patrick. I contracted sepsis aged 9 months old, and as a result I lost all of the fingers on my left hand, the second and third digits on my right hand, and my right leg below the knee. But I survived. Stop sepsis, save lives.
So I'd like to thank Glen for inviting me. Thanks, Glen. I think that this is a remarkable opportunity that Glen has started, and I'm just very grateful to be part of it. I'm a big fan of pre-hospital emergency medicine and hope to someday perhaps practice as a consultant in pre-hospital emergency medicine, along with others around the country. I'm currently a specialist registrar in emergency medicine at Cork University Hospital. I have not given up my Dublin roots, despite the accent. For about 14 years since I came here, I was in Dublin, and I've worked in a lot of Dublin hospitals. And as Glen mentioned, I was involved in the advanced paramedic program at UCD for many years. So this is the title of the talk that Glen gave me. And this is an itty-bitty part of what we're going to talk about. But there's really only about 3 themes. So we'll talk a little bit about epidemiology and economics. We'll talk a little bit about the spectrum of disease that is sepsis. And we'll talk about management, which is the Sepsis 6. So what you'll find out is that sepsis is common. It's deadly. It is a time-sensitive emergency, and it's treatable. And if you remember those 4 things, then that's all you need to know, really. And I'm done. Good night. So, but we'll look at it a little bit more closely. So, does anybody know who this is? No. Sorry? Oh, you know who that is. So I was going to say, did I hear someone say hubba hubba? But that doesn't count. So this is Mariana de Brady de Costa. She's a Brazilian supermodel who was a finalist to represent Brazil in the Miss World contest. So in December of 2008, she sorry. All right. She presented to the hospital at the end of December 2008 and was discharged after having been given a diagnosis of kidney stones. And she returned to the hospital on the 4th of January in septic shock from a urinary tract infection caused by an unlikely organism that you wouldn't normally find in urine. And she was extremely unwell. She was admitted to ICU, and 3 weeks later she had to have her hands and feet amputated as a consequence of the overwhelming infection. And the following day she died. This happened when she was 20 years old. So Mariana is the face of sepsis. Sepsis doesn't care about age, it doesn't care about sex, it doesn't care about how much money you make, and it doesn't care where you live. So it doesn't matter if you're in Sydney, in the center of intensive care land, or if you're in a village in Botswana, or if you're in the US, or if you're in Balligo backward, Ireland. Sepsis can attack. So here's a little epidemiology. So we've got sepsis on the far end there. And these are US figures, unfortunately. But it shows that, that sepsis has an incidence or a prevalence of 377 per 100,000 in the population. So which do you think is next? Of the 4 other diseases that are listed there, stroke, cancer, MI, and HIV, which do you think is next? Yeah, in America, yeah. Sorry? Cancer, okay. So how many people think it's cancer? Okay, how many people think it's something else? So, okay, if you think it's something else, what do you think it is? What do you think comes next? MI, okay. So what do you think is last? Okay. So it's the cancer versus MI group, I suppose, in terms of who's next. So cancer is next, but it's combined cancers. So the MI group probably is right. So this is lung, breast, and prostate. You're seeing a figure there of 333 per 100,000. The MI group is 208 per 100,000. The stroke group is 223, and that leaves the HIV group at about 23 per 100,000. And you'll keep an eye on those figures for a later time. What has happened in a very short space of time is that the number of admissions to hospital due to sepsis has remarkably increased. So in 2000, there were about 621,000, again, these are US figures, 621,000 admissions to hospital due to sepsis. In 2008, that figure had jumped to 1.14 million, which is an enormous increase. And that number is continuing to rise due to patients who are immunocompromised, due to the aging population. And now, as we speak, there are more admissions in the US and probably around the world related to sepsis than there are to ischemic heart disease, which probably no one would have thought about, no one would have realized some years ago. So sepsis is really expensive. So again, these are US figures, but that's a big number. That's $14.5 billion in 1 year for sepsis care for those patients affected. It's estimated that in Europe, the cost of looking after a single patient for a single episode of sepsis runs about 25,000 euro. Again, extremely expensive. So this is why it matters, because it's common, people get it, a lot of people get it, it's deadly, and the research, this goes back to what we were looking at earlier in terms of the prevalence within the population of the illness, with sepsis being number 1. And this is how much was spent by the National Institutes of Health, which is a federally funded US government agency. Now, there is research that goes on privately as well, or there are private organizations that do research in the US and around the world for these various illnesses. But this is funding to the NIH, which is the National Institutes of Health, which does an enormous body of work and is recognized internationally for the work that they do. So which do you think is number 1 here in terms of money that they got? Cancer, okay? So who thinks cancer? Okay, so if you didn't think cancer, what did you think? Who said HIV? Way up in the back. So do we have any other votes for HIV? A smattering of votes. Okay, so let's take a look how these are revealed in, I think, reverse order, if I recall correctly. Oh no, actually no, it's in rising order, descending order. I mean, so HIV gets the most. Okay, so they got $2.9 billion in that particular year. Okay. Then it goes to cancer, again combined for these 3 cancers, prostate, breast, and lung. Then it went to MI. And even if you look at the difference between cancer and MI, cancer got nearly 2.3 billion, MI got 1.2. Stroke, about 327 million. Sepsis, 91 million. Tiny little amount for the biggest burden of disease. Now, this isn't to suggest that we shouldn't be doing HIV/AIDS research. I suspect that as a consequence of all that money going into HIV and HIV research, it has turned the tide for patients who have HIV. So clearly that has been a benefit. But if you consider the amount of money that is being spent on patients who have sepsis, and the amount of money that's being researched on it, perhaps there's an inequity there that should be corrected. That's a little sort of a public service announcement from the Sepsis Trust in the UK, and they have a collection of videos on their website that are actually quite good, both educational videos related to all different parts of the sepsis problem. So if I were to go down Grafton Street and ask the first 100 people I met, what do you know about Savita Halappanavar? I reckon probably a good quarter to third probably wouldn't have any idea who I was talking about. Now, okay, back then maybe, but now I suspect that if I asked 100 people, probably a third, roughly, I'm guessing, but a third probably wouldn't have any idea. Perhaps it would be higher. Maybe I'm just being overly cynical. Then I think the vast majority of people would tell me that that her situation was in relation to something completely different from what the real focus was, because of what the media and politicians did to this case at the time that it was fresh in the media. So at the time of her death, because she died in hospital, she was an automatic coroner's inquest. Sorry, she was an automatic coroner's post-mortem. So anybody who dies in hospital from unexplained causes usually has to have a post-mortem. And then after that, depending upon the circumstances, the coroner can then decide whether or not to hold an inquest. So in this case, there was an inquest, and it was obviously quite public. But the report, which I think is very important, and this is taken directly from the report, is that the cause of death was fulminant septic shock from E. coli bacteremia and ascending genital tract sepsis. So while the focus of the media and of the politicians was completely different, and that kind of got the public on that bandwagon, the core of her problem was sepsis. And now admittedly, I have not read the entire report, but I suspect that potentially, had her condition been recognized earlier, the outcome may have been different. Now, I'm speculating completely, but the thing is I have a reasonable understanding that her condition was not recognized early, and this is what led to her having septic shock. So it's deadly, and you've just seen that little clip from the Sepsis Trust. So every 3.5 seconds, somewhere in the world dies of sepsis. It is the primary cause of death from infection, even though we have antibiotics, vaccines, and intensive care. And it causes more deaths than HIV, AIDS, breast cancer, and prostate cancer combined. So that's a big deal. And 70% of deaths in the developing world are due to sepsis. So these are from a variety of studies that show the mortality connected to sepsis. So these are deaths connected to sepsis or severe sepsis. And this is the problem with these studies, is that the authors can, I don't want to say manipulate the definition, but they potentially use different definitions to decide whether these patients were septic, severely septic, or had septic shock. But anyway, you're looking at a range of 28 to 50% of people who have this condition who potentially could end up dying. Something that's completely treatable and potentially preventable. So what about us? So in 2013, there were about 8,900 cases in hospital, representing over 221,000 days in a bed in a hospital. So the average length of stay, if you go into hospital for whatever, you'll probably end up staying about 5.6 days. If you end up staying in hospital for sepsis, you'll end up staying on average 26 days. So that's 5 times the amount, just from that single condition. Now the problem with getting Irish statistics is that, number one, we can't trace it in the community. We have no mechanism to track it in the community. Number two, the statistics that we do have come from what's called the HIPE system, or the Hospital Inpatient Inquiry System, and that isn't, that's a coding system. So if you go to hospital, let's say to have your gallbladder out, and you're a diabetic and you have high blood pressure. So you go into the hospital, you have your gallbladder out, and the intern fills out a discharge summary when you leave and says, bye-bye, we'll see you in the clinic, then that discharge summary goes to someone in an office who codes all the diseases that you've had or all the diagnoses that you've had. So number 1 is going to be removal of gallbladder. And then number 2, because you have high blood pressure, and number 3, because you have diabetes, all those are going to get coded in, because coding represents money. The problem with HYPE is that it allows you to code sepsis, and it allows you to code infection. So it allows you to code a chest infection, it allows you to code for a kidney infection, it allows you to code for a urinary tract infection. So that's why the numbers that I've just said are probably underestimated, because some of those people who had those infections, who were coded as having an infection, probably had sepsis. So it's not an ideal system. Now, in 2015, they've upgraded the system to include sepsis, severe sepsis, and septic shock, which hopefully will make a difference in the figures. Now, in terms of mortality in Ireland, the approximate mortality in intensive care units has been shown to be about 28.8%. In 2006, there was a study done across 14 intensive care units, both in the Republic and Northern Ireland, which showed a prevalence of severe sepsis and septic shock of 35% and a mortality of 24.6%. In any event, what you're getting is about a quarter of people who are dying, even if they go to intensive care. So this is not a good thing. Sepsis is a bad thing. So what do MI, or heart attack, stroke, and trauma all have in common? Just moving in a different direction. I really can't move. I feel burdened by standing there. So what do they all have in common? MI, stroke, trauma. Pre-alert. Pre-alert, good, I like that, yeah. That is good, that's very good, yeah. We'll come back to pre-alert, yeah. Because I'm a big fan of pre-alert, but I guess the football match must be tomorrow. They're having their pep rally.
They're all time critical.
They're all time critical. Ding, ding, ding. Give the man a platinum cigar. I don't know what that means. So they're all time critical, all right? And that's the issue with sepsis. Sepsis is a time critical emergency, and it's not recognized as such because it's difficult to recognize it. So we've all seen this.
When a stroke strikes, the damage spreads like a fire in the brain. To spot the signs of a stroke, you have to think and act fast. F. Face. Has the face fallen on one side? Can they smile? A. Arms. Can they raise both arms and keep them there? S. Speech. Is their speech slurred? T. Time. Just like a fire, it's time to call 999 if you see any single one of these signs. The faster you act, the more of the person you save. When stroke strikes, act fast.
So this was an extremely effective campaign by the Irish Heart Foundation. That we now have fast ambulances. I don't know how fast they actually go, but they say fast on the side. But this campaign was launched in 2010, and stroke-related admissions rose 87% after this campaign. There was an increase in 55% of ambulance calls for strokes, and 59% arrived to hospital in time to potentially receive thrombolysis. So this was a major progress in treating strokes, an enormous progress. So this guy, he rocks up to the ED, right? Whatever, or his GP sends him in. Or Glen picks him up in a Nina, right? And then brings him in. So so maybe he doesn't bring him to me, but what is Glen going to do? Or what's the triage nurse going to do? As soon as this guy comes in going, oh, I have chest pain. Who said that? No, I heard it. A 12 lead, yeah. So they're going to do an ECG, because why? They're hunting for what? They're hunting for a STEMI. So if Glen goes to this guy's house and does this 12-lead ECG, what does he see? Stunned silence. What does he see? He sees an inferior MI. Okay, so for those who are unfamiliar, 2, 3, and AVF in that L-shaped pattern there are all raised, and that's an ST elevation MI here. Well, you can't see mine. So that's an ST elevation MI. So Glen is going to pick up a phone and call the Mater and say, I've got a STEMI, I'm coming to you. I'm coming right now. Open the lab. And they'll say, meet us in the emergency room. Itty bitty joke. They'll say, okay, fine, come to the lab. And that's what will happen. They will go straight to the cath lab and get their stent. So when Glen sees this is the equivalent of medical porn, okay? Because this gets you excited, all right? Because you can do something about this very quickly. Now, Glen goes to this guy's house. He's not so excited. He's like, you've got man flu. Well, why did you call an ambulance? Right? But so this is the guy who comes in to triage and goes, or the lady who comes in and says, oh, I don't feel well. And can you imagine a PSA? If you don't feel well, if you think you have a temperature, call an ambulance. What would happen then? So this is the problem with sepsis. The problem with sepsis is that it isn't sexy, like stroke, where you've got somebody's face doing this and their arm doing that, and it's just happened in front of you, and you've got 4.5 hours to do something about it. It's not the guy who's going, oh, my chest, there's an elephant on it, and then Glen does the ECG and finds what you expect to find if somebody's having an ST elevation MI. This is the guy or the gal who's kind of just meh. And that's the problem with sepsis. You can't do a PSA on it, because then that would wreak havoc on the public. Everybody would have sepsis then. So what you need to do is you need to educate caregivers at all levels. So anybody who in any capacity interfaces with potential patients, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a community first responder, EMT, paramedic, AP, doctor, nurse, nurse's aide in a nursing home. It doesn't matter. You have to sort of know what to look for. And I think once people know what to look for, then it becomes a little bit easier. But the key thing is that, like a stroke, like an MI, sepsis is time sensitive. And that goes back to Christy's point, where it's pre-alert. So from my perspective, if someone has severe sepsis, and we'll come to the definitions in a moment, if someone has severe sepsis or septic shock, then I think it behooves those practitioners to pre-alert the emergency department that they're coming with a patient who potentially needs resuscitation. The stroke patient is likely to go very quickly to get a CAT scan and then potentially get thrombolized and go to a stroke unit. So their time in the emergency department might be very limited. The STEMI patient is theoretically supposed to bypass the emergency department, and in most cases does. So now that leaves the sepsis patient, and the sepsis patient will stay with us. Now they may be admitted, and they will likely be admitted, potentially they'll need to go to intensive care, but they're likely to stay in the emergency department. So after the Savita Halappanavar case, the HICWA did an inspection for patient safety at University Hospital Galway, and they came out with some recommendations, and on the basis of those recommendations, the minister asked for the National Clinical Effectiveness Committee to come up with a national sepsis guideline. This was released in November 2014 and was endorsed by the UK National Institute for Health and Care Excellence just last spring. So if you've heard of NICE guidelines, there are NICE guidelines for everything. They're internationally recognized. They're an enormous enterprise. So they have guidelines on asthma, atrial fibrillation, DVT. They have guidelines on nearly everything, and they've endorsed this guideline as meeting their standards. So this is the logo for the HSC's sepsis campaign. Recognize sepsis, enhanced survival, which I think makes a lot of sense. So what do we need to know? We need to know how to define these things. And this is the spectrum of illness that sepsis sits on. So you go from SIRS to sepsis, to severe sepsis, to septic shock, to multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. So SIRS, what's SIRS? So SIRS is the systemic inflammatory response syndrome, and it means that something is happening to you and the body is reacting to it to compensate for it. So what are some of those markers? So if you have a temperature, too high or too low, if your heart rate is greater than 90, if your respiratory rate is 20, greater than 20, if you have a new altered level of consciousness, this one can be difficult because you go see Granny in the nursing home. She has thought that she's the Queen of Spain for the past 10 years. Now she thinks she's the Duchess of Cornwall. So is that a new altered level of consciousness or not? Is it still in keeping with the whole royal theme? So that's why it can be difficult sometimes in the elderly and those who have Alzheimer's, etc. And is their blood glucose greater than 7.7 in the absence of diabetes? So these are all things that pre-hospital practitioners can do. There's nothing there that a pre-hospital practitioner can't do. And then in the hospital we can do a full blood count, which gives us white cells. And if the white cells are greater than 12 or less than 4, that's another one. That's another marker of SIRS. So that is SIRS on its own, just hanging out all by itself. So lots of things can cause SIRS without causing sepsis. So right now, am I SIRS positive? Probably. So my heart rate is probably greater than 90, and I probably have an altered level of consciousness. So people when you really don't want me to move, do you? people when they take their leaving cert, they're going to be SIRS positive. You ram your car into a tree, you're going to be SIRS positive. So there are loads of things that can cause SIRS. So sepsis is SIRS plus infection, whether you know it for sure or whether you suspect it. Okay? So if you go to someone's house and they tell you, I've been sick for 3 days, and their temp is 39 and their heart rate is 100, and they tell you that they've been coughing up green crap, so you can probably suspect that they might have a chest infection. Because normally if you have just a cold or an upper respiratory tract infection, you're unlikely to be coughing up green crap. Okay? Similarly, if you go to that nursing home and Granny usually is all right, and now she thinks she's the Queen of Spain, and her temperature is 39, and she tells you it stings when she pees, well then you can probably suspect that she's having a urinary tract infection. She's septic from that. So it's suspected or confirmed. And confirmed obviously means that, okay, maybe you went to your GP on day 1 when you started coughing up green stuff. He took a sample and sent it to the lab, and now the lab has come back and said, yep, there's bugs in that. So that would be a confirmed case, for example. So severe sepsis, we're moving along, is complicated by organ dysfunction. And these are organ dysfunction, this is organ dysfunction that's new. So it's not that your kidneys have been banjaxed for 20 years and now suddenly they're slightly worse. This is just sort of new organ dysfunction. So what are some of those? So the big one is going to be a systolic less than 90 or a mean of less than 70. But really the systolic of less than 90 is what most people will go by. Then some of these other things are things we can do in hospital, although there are people who, there are point of care monitors that can do lactates in the field. Oliguria of less than 0.5 mils per kilo for 2 hours. So this means that you're not peeing as often as much as you should. So with fluids, so someone's giving you fluids, let's say it's me, you should be peeing about a half a mil per kilo per hour. So in someone my size, well, that would probably be about 35 to 40 mils an hour. So if I'm not making that much in 2 hours, so if I'm not making about 70 to 80 mils in 2 hours, my kidneys aren't happy. Say I only put out 20 mils in those 2 hours. My kidneys are not happy. A bilirubin is a marker of liver function. Platelets are a hematologic marker. And when they start to go low, then that fosters a coagulation cascade, which is why Mariana had to have her hands and feet amputated. And an INR of greater than 1.5. So that again has to do with the coagulation cascade. You might know the INR as related to warfarin. People who are on warfarin have to have their INR checked regularly to make sure that it's within the therapeutic range, because it can be dangerous if it goes beyond that. Septic shock then is severe sepsis. So you notice that the definitions take what's happened before and add something to it. So sepsis was SIRS plus infection. Then we had severe sepsis complicated by organ dysfunction. Now, septic shock is severe sepsis with circulatory shock with signs of organ dysfunction or hypoperfusion despite fluid recess. So this basically means you've given roughly 30 mils per kilo of fluid to somebody and their systolic is still less than 90. Or their lactate is greater than 4. So these are not good things. So, and some of those other markers of organ dysfunction are present as well. So that's what septic shock is. Multi-organ dysfunction syndrome means you're circling the drain. So even if you're in ICU and you've got multi-organ dysfunction syndrome, things are not looking good at all. So multi-organ system dysfunction syndrome means that more than one system is failing. So let's say the person with pneumonia comes in and now they're getting worse and worse and their blood pressure is very low. So their blood pressure is not responding to fluids. We've given them 2 liters or 2.5 liters and their blood pressure is not responding. So now that means that their heart is not pumping properly. So that's one system, circulatory system, or the heart system is shut down and not working properly. But they have pneumonia, so now they're retaining carbon dioxide and they're not breathing as effectively as they should. So now they either have to go on a non-invasive ventilation, which is CPAP or BiPAP. If they're retaining CO2, it's more likely to be BiPAP. Or they just outright need to be intubated. So now you've got intubation and circulatory shock from the heart not working. But it doesn't have to be those 2, for example. It can be any 2. So it could be the heart with the liver, it could be the heart with the kidney, it could be the chest and the kidneys not working. It has to be 2 or more is the point of multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. And that's really when the chances of mortality rise significantly. So here's the spectrum. There you go. So you start at the end with SIRS, which is a clinical response arising from an insult. Sepsis is SIRS plus infection. Severe sepsis is organ dysfunction or tissue hypoperfusion. And then septic shock is when you're still in that state despite getting approximately 30 mils per kilo of fluid recess. So here's where we come to the title of the talk. So this is the treatment. So the treatment is the sepsis 6. So the sepsis 6 is take 3 and give 3. Okay? So take 3. Those are things that you can't do. Those are things you can't do in the pre-hospital arena yet. So blood cultures. We have to take blood cultures before we give antibiotics. Bloods. We have to at least take an FBC, which is a full blood count, and a lactate. Full blood count because we want to know the white cells. A lactate because we want to know if there's any degree of tissue hypoperfusion. And then urine output, we want to monitor, we want to see what the person is peeing. Now, if they're able to give you the sample, great. Or if they're able to go to the loo, then that's fine, they can do that. But if they're not, then they have to be catheterized so that the volume that they're putting out can be monitored hourly. in comparison to what's being given. So we know how much we're giving, and we can see what's coming out then. So it's a much better method of keeping an eye on output. So that's take 3. Now give 3. So we're going to give some oxygen, and again, Glen covered this with the British Thoracic Society guidelines on the use of oxygen in the emergency setting. So we're going to titrate that. We're going to give fluids, and we're not going to necessarily be overly cautious initially, especially in the context of hypotension. And then we're going to give antibiotics. We have to do all that within an hour of identifying sepsis. That is the goal. That's the goal. The goal is to do all of these 6 things within 1 hour of saying, you're septic. Then we have to go find what's causing the sepsis. So we have to search for the source. So the source can be anything. So from head to toe, anything can get infected, okay? So brain, meningitis, eyeball, orbital cellulitis, neck, funky things. No, well, it's true. Mainly in the neck, you're going to get funky things that cause infection. But chest, you're going to get pneumonia. You could potentially get endocarditis, myocarditis. You could get a lung abscess. I mean, it goes on. The list goes on. Belly, intra-abdominal, sepsis, pyelonephritis in the kidneys, acute ascending cholangitis of the gallbladder. You can get a cellulitis anywhere. You can get an osteomyelitis in the bones. And then this is just looking at the itises. But then, of course, you have to think about the immunosuppressed population. So perhaps the HIV patient who's taking antiretrovirals, they're more susceptible. The cancer patient who's on chemotherapy, they're more susceptible because of their immunosuppression. The young, the old, they're more susceptible. But you have to search for the source. That's very important so that you can direct your therapy. So initially, when you give antibiotics, you're going to do it by your local guideline. So my guideline at Cork University Hospital is likely to be different from Mercy Hospital, even though we're in the same city. And that's potentially different from St. James's, which is going to be different from Beaumont. There'll be nuanced differences, but they potentially will be different. So then septic shock, you have to consider a resuscitation bundle, which means you keep giving fluids. You have to get now ICU involved because now the patient is heading towards multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. You've done everything you can, or we've done everything we can, and now potentially the patient is going to require other support that can't be given outside of intensive care. So they need to be involved early. As soon as there's a whiff of septic shock, or even potentially severe sepsis, ICU should be involved. Inotrope use is a category of drugs that help with blood pressure. So they make the blood pressure go up during this phase. And very often, septic patients have to have a central line put into their neck or their groin or underneath their collarbone in order to get these medicines. And then again, source control is key, finding where the bug is. Now, sometimes it's very obvious, and sometimes it's very easy. Other times it's a bit more difficult. And you're aiming for a mean arterial pressure of 65. So in these cases now, we're moving away from looking at the systolic of 90, and we're looking at a mean of 65. And a mean of 65 is good, should be good for everything. It should be good for the brain, it should be good for the kidneys, the liver. Everybody should be happy with a mean of 65, even though the systolic may not be over 90.
Alan, can you do a mean arterial pressure pre-hospital?
You can.
Okay, how does that?
So, anybody know? So there are a couple of different ways of doing it. I think the easier way is, so you take the systolic, park it, then you take the systolic and subtract the diastolic, and take a third of that, and then bring your systolic back and add the two together. So, for example, if your blood pressure is 120/80, which I would expect yours would be. So 120 over 80. So you take the 120 and you move it over somewhere. So 120 over 80, 120 minus 80 is 40. Half of 40 is no, sorry, a third of 40 is 13. Sorry, I forgot to say you need to take 2/3 of the 120. So you take that and you end up with about 90.
So 2/3 the diastolic plus the systolic.
No, systolic.
Divided by 3. Wouldn't be up there.
No.
Although you might 15, there's a try in there.
There's a 5 bracket.
Then there's that answer. In fairness, on most pre-hospital monitors, it'll come up in brackets, and it does in hospital as well. So you'll get your 120 over 80, and then it'll come up in brackets. If someone on the Twitter sphere can make sure that my maths were right there, that would be great. Okay, so here we are. We're almost there. So this is the relationship between sepsis and SIRS. Okay, so you've got infection over on the left. You've got all these things on the right-hand side, and everything here can cause SIRS. So this is SIRS. What you're looking at is SIRS. Okay, and there's your overlap. Okay, so infection can cause SIRS and all these other things, amongst others. By the way, this is not an exhaustive list over here. Trauma, burns, pancreatitis. This is not an exhaustive list of things that can cause SIRS. Like I said, doing the leaving cert can cause SIRS. So, but then here's your interface of infection and SIRS is sepsis, and then there's that subspecialty interface of bacteremia. So bacteremia means you've got bugs in the blood. Okay, that's all that means. Now those bugs could have come from your chest, it could have come from your kidneys, it could have come from your urine, it could have come from your brain, but somehow they've gotten into the bloodstream, and that's what bacteremia is. It does not necessarily mean that your sepsis is worse. So here is a CPG for all levels of practitioner. And I was fortunate enough to be on the committee that looked at creating this sepsis guideline, along with Dave Menzies and one of the a couple of the APs. Dennis had a big interest in this, and he looked at it for his master's. And Dave O'Connor was on that panel as well, and Brian Power, etc. So this is obviously improved from. This is from the 2014 guidelines, and beforehand it was essentially for the pediatric population and give benzylpen in the context of a suspected meningitis only. So I think that this is much better, because now it says look for SIRS, think about whether or not it could be an infection, and it gives some examples, although clearly not an exhaustive list, and then. If you think you've got sepsis, it says to request ALS, which is interesting. Again, highlighting the importance of sepsis, highlighting the importance of early treatment in sepsis. Then it goes on to say, go ahead and give benzylpen. Now, benzylpenicillin is not an ideal antibiotic in this circumstance. So, in an unknown sepsis, so you believe someone is septic, but you're uncertain about where the source is or where the infection is coming from. Benzylpenicillin will be helpful only with certain organisms. So there are better antibiotics, and hopefully down the line, those better antibiotics will be available to advanced paramedics. So if they have signs of poor perfusion, they define the signs of poor perfusion, which are essentially what we described were signs of hemodynamic compromise or instability, and if they do have signs of poor perfusion, they get a bolus of 500 mils of 0.9% saline. If not, they get a bolus of 250. And then if the systolic is below 100, they keep getting aliquots of 250 mils of saline. And here's the key here. The key here is pre-alert if severe sepsis. So if you're continuing to give boluses because things are not in good nick, then that is an opportunity to pre-alert the emergency department that a patient is coming, so that they can prepare. I'm always of the opinion that it is better to be prepared and decide, no, this patient did not need resus, than the converse, where an ambulance arrives and then resus is needed, and there's a moment or an element of chaos while that's getting organized, because in many places around the country, resus is full. And so there is that difficulty about resus is full. Now we're getting a pre-alert for anything. So now what do we do with the patients that are in resus? And if we're moving somebody to make room for somebody who doesn't need it, is that the best use of resources? Again, I personally think that it's better to be prepared. It's better to have an awareness that a potentially very sick patient is coming than the converse, than to be met with somebody not having had that knowledge. The other thing is I think that pre-hospital practitioners need to be patient advocates. And I have a keen awareness of the challenges around the country of ambulance triage, the occasional difficulties with ambulance triage. But I think if you're in a situation where you believe a patient has severe sepsis or septic shock, then you have a responsibility to the patient to ensure that is identified to someone. So if the senior nurse who's taken the ambulance triage seems uninterested, then find another nurse. So there's also the possibility of finding a doctor who will be interested. I realize what I'm saying there, but usually one of the senior doctors in the department, whether a consultant or a registrar, will be in the department, and I think it's completely within your scope of practice to go and say to them, look, I've just brought this guy in, he's been unwell for a couple of days, and this is what I have found. I think he really could be headed towards severe sepsis here. I know personally, and I know the majority of my colleagues would welcome that interaction, because basically what you're trying to do is prevent that patient from going to ICU, and that is the key. Again, it's all about time sensitive. So if somebody was having a stroke and they had their stroke 1 hour ago, you would be jumping up and down. There's this acceptance that, they've got a bit of a cough and things will be okay. Anyway, that's my soapbox. Pre-alert is my soapbox. So here's the plan, right? Pre-hospital plan. Early assessment. And it doesn't matter who you are in terms of what level of practitioner are. You can assess someone based on the definitions that I've given you. You can recognize it. And if you can't necessarily give an antibiotic or give fluids, you can activate the process to do that. And the notion is to prevent septic shock and prevent mortality. I was just going to say, when I was I only graduated 12 years ago from med school at a different institution that shall go unnamed. But I only graduated 12 years ago, and in medical school I had one lecture from a surgeon. Now I shouldn't say it in that tone, but I had a lecture from a surgeon about sepsis. So this is how kind of recent this is becoming, how recently this has unfolded in terms of, I don't want to say popularity, but in terms of scope and attention and the fact that people are now recognizing it. So I graduated in 2004, and then I was an emergency department senior house officer in 2005. And even then, there weren't protocols to recognize it, etc. So this is a relatively recent phenomenon, but now it has completely taken off. And some of the resources that you'll see at the end are all geared toward education. So this is one of these educational clips that have been made to try and help people recognize sepsis.
bringing Sepsis back. It's vasoactive shock and that's a fact. It makes your BP drop oh so fast. So grab a lactate, run the fluid stab. Tube it to the lab. Infected babe, you're in the shock and it's getting great. I start the bundle, just don't hope and pray. It's just that sepsis makes me feel this way. Take him to the unit. Breathe in the blue. Meet search criteria. She's TACA 2. Meet search criteria. Temp 102. Meet search criteria. Left shift voodoo. Meet search criteria. Mr. Work a bit. Go ahead, get with it. Check the UA. For bacteria. Quick chest x-ray. For pneumonia. Give cultures too. For bacteremia. Get your sepsis on. Go ahead, suspect it. Get your sepsis on. Go ahead, detect it. Get your sepsis on. Go ahead, suppress it. Get your sepsis on. Go ahead, correct it. Get your sepsis on. Don't dare neglect it. Get your sepsis on. Go ahead, correct it. Get your sepsis on. Get your sepsis on.
It actually goes on for another 2 minutes. I trimmed it. So just a couple of plugs. Plug number one. The Irish Association for Emergency Medicine holds its annual scientific meeting yearly. And essentially, it's in Dublin, then out of Dublin, back to Dublin, etc., in and out. So 2 years ago, it was in Dunleary, and it was hosted by St. Vincent's. Dave Menzies was the chair. It was an extraordinary conference. Scott Weingart was at it. This past year, we were fortunate enough to host it in Cork. I say fortunate, in inverted commas. No, it was an amazing couple of days. And one of the things that Conor Deasy did, who was the chair this year, he asked the speakers to limit their talks to 8 minutes. And we called them blast talks, and that enabled us to invite more speakers and have more talks on a greater range of topics. So now those talks are now being released weekly by theme. So all the talks were themed. So the first set of talks was making the diagnosis. The second set of talks was technology. The third set of talks was pre-hospital emergency medicine, so on, peds, research, and so on and so forth. And all of those themes are being released weekly on the IAM website at that address. You don't have to write down the whole thing. If you just go to the iam.ie website, click on the professional tab, and then you'll find the conference talks there. And there's a whole range of subjects that you might find interesting. There's probably a whole range of subjects you won't find interesting, but that's the beauty of it being 8 minutes. You know, it's nugget-sized information. It's nugget-sized learning in your leisure. And then finally, I will follow Glen's lead and invite you to Killarney for the EMS gathering. This is a truly unique meeting that was held for the first time in 2013, I want to say. Yeah, 2013, and now I believe they're looking to do it on alternate years. But it's really for anybody who has an interest in immediate care. And the unique thing about the EMS gathering is that it combines leisure with learning. So you have your sort of standard plenary sessions in the morning with a series of speakers. Again, they're a bit tighter than what you'd expect, or than what I did tonight, for example. So they're a bit shorter, more concise. And then you have leisure activities which you can choose yourself, and there's always some sort of learning that goes along with that. So there's a sepsis bus. Guess who the conductor is? And there's hill walks where you can learn about. I don't remember the program in detail, but you can go on a hill walk and learn about oxygen. You can there'll be a tactical EMS group this year talking about active shooter scenarios. There's a farm injury for the first time. There's a farm injury workshop in the afternoon, which will talk about all kinds of things related to farm injuries. We have an international HEMS and search and rescue panel with participants from the US, Australia, the UK, and Ireland. And of course, you can't beat the crack in Killarney. It's superb. So you should make every effort to attend. There's the website, emsgathering.com. You'll find the program there in its entirety. Early registration, I think, closes in about a month or so. My recollection is that it's not exceedingly pricey for the 2 days and for the extent of the learning that you get. So that is me, and here are some of the resources that I was referencing throughout the talk.
I suppose I've got to need to split the microphone here. Thank you. The reason I've asked Alan to kind of come in on this, especially from the sepsis perspective, is that I've done the septic bus, and this guy comes out in a gladiator uniform, and it's the most funniest thing I'd ever see. But it's really, really.
That was a one-time deal.
Okay, but I tried to find that picture, but I couldn't find it. But Alan has always presented a very, very excellent talk on sepsis, and sepsis is a huge thing pre-hospitally now. Twitter sphere is going crazy here. So can I put a few things to you, kind of, if that's possible?
Did anybody come up with the formula?
Yeah, it's 16 people came up with
great.
The same formula, which is nothing recollection to yours. Resembles yours, but anyway, they all talk about the same one. One thing I wanted to ask you myself, as a follower of you on Twitter, and found Periscope. Some of you may not be familiar with Periscope, but Alan actually uses Periscope for a journal club which takes place in CUH in Cork, and I found it very, very beneficial over the year. Is that still happening? Are you still?
It is. So I will readily admit that I am a novice Twitterer. And I find that I don't tweet as much as I should. I sort of understand that I've got to find a way to tweet more. And even the Irish EMS chats, I have longed to participate. And it seems like every time that there's a topic that I'm interested in, I'm either on nights or post nights or have a conflicting appointment, and it's just very frustrating. Now, the guy who runs that tells me that you can who knew you could do this, but you can pre-record your tweets and they can go out.
That's right, yeah.
So that's interesting.
So Periscope is a live feed that links in at the same time. So basically what happens is the medics down in Cork University will get together, was it Wednesday morning?
Thursday morning. At 7.
And they will discuss case studies, and two medics will give a presentation on a particular paper, similar to what we were doing earlier on. And it's free. You just click on a Periscope and you can link into this and watch it live as it happens. The only difference with Periscope is it only stays there for 24 hours and then it's gone. So you kind of have to make sure you know what's coming up. Okay, Twitter sphere. Jason McKenna, who's watching on from his couch in Monaghan, says, excellent sepsis presentation. Fiacre Morris, what do I have to do to pull off a Dram FM bow tie? Stylish, hashtag OBICBC. So one of the questions that's coming forward with regards to antibiotics, and it's interesting to see it's on the severe sepsis aspect. The questions that are being raised is, how does the administration of antibiotics pre-hospitally affect the blood culture when the patient arrives?
So yeah, ideally we would prefer that blood cultures were taken before antibiotics were given. But in the interval in which antibiotics are given in a pre-hospital setting, even in the most remote areas, say Dingle, where it takes them 2 hours to get to me. That is, I don't believe, and I don't think there's any evidence, and perhaps some of my more learned colleagues on the Twitter sphere can chime in. I don't believe that there's anything to suggest that is going to impact negatively on the blood cultures coming back, positive or not.
Okay.
So I say crack on. And the other issue is that, going back to the antibiotic, is that it would be beneficial for advanced paramedics to have access to something that's broader spectrum.
So Dr. Menzies is watching in as well, probably with his kids on his couch in Bray, in between 16 other things that's going on in his head. It can be harder to get diagnostic results from the cultures if an antibiotic is given first, hence reserved for severe infections, but CPG guidance on that as well. 2016 sepsis.
Yes, and so I can't disagree with that, because that is the teaching. I mean, we're told to wait. We're always told to take the cultures before we give the antibiotic. What I would say is that if a practitioner has doubt about should I give this or shouldn't I, because like I say, the benzyl pen is meh, it's probably better than nothing, but it's not great. So I would think if there's doubt in the practitioner's mind, then they can call for oversight. They can call for direction from Medico Cork to see if in their circumstance we would give the...
and they may get you on the other end of the phone.
They certainly might get me.
Dave Menzies also saying 2016 sepsis CPG will allow broader spectrum antibiotics and more rational fluid choice. Okay.
The other thing to say is that next week, so 1 week, well, on Monday, the third consensus definition for sepsis will be published by the task force on defining sepsis. So these are, all the mucky mucks who go to these meetings and make up definitions.
Hashtag mucky muck.
But I didn't say holy cannoli.
No, he did not yet. Anyway, he just did.
So that's going to be sepsis 3.0. I've seen sort of a draft of what this is going to look like, and I don't think it will necessarily impact how we screen patients. So what I gave you there in terms of the SIRS and then the infection, that's a screening tool, and I think that hopefully that will remain as a screening tool, because I think that that's very simple, and I think you can teach that to people. And I think if you start to make things more complicated with more convoluted definitions or ICU scores, it may complicate things unnecessarily. So watch that space.
Alan Bott is tweeting in from Canada. He's going to tell me where he is now in a sec. But he's actually, somebody has tweeted into him from Illinois, in USA, who's watching and thinks it's a fantastic resource and is going to share it with their students in Illinois, USA. So, another one on twice the diastolic plus the systolic divided by 3, or look in the brackets on the machine. Can pre-hospital... so here's a good one for you, okay? So, Jason again from Monaghan. Can pre-hospital end-tidal CO2 be utilised in sepsis diagnosis, i.e. a lower capnography reading? Associated with, because I recently read an article that said that an investment in lactate monitoring in an ambulance service, pre-hospital service, compared to the introduction of capnography, it's a far cheaper way to give you another SIRS marker.
So yes, a marker of organ dysfunction is your PCO2.
Yes.
So or your
end-tidal CO2.
Your end-tidal CO2 that you get on your monitors. That's usually a rise in end-tidal CO2.
A rise more so.
Because people are retaining CO2.
Okay.
People are usually people who are having respiratory failure are usually retaining CO2.
Okay.
So in broad terms.
Okay, so I'm going to remember that. Yep.
So there, just before that, will pre-hospital lactate become available in Irish EMS?
Will pre-hospital lactate become available in Irish EMS?
Who asked that?
Who said?
Jason
McKenna.
All right.
Jason's fantastic.
He's flying.
Yeah,
So the short answer is I don't know.
You don't know.
No, Here's the thing. So in order to become a consultant in emergency medicine in Ireland, you have to pass a 6-stage exam, and one of the parts of the exam is to write a bit of a topic review on a subject, and you have to submit it to the emergency medicine college, and it's reviewed by consultants who then call you for an oral exam and talk to you about this. So I have submitted my topic review, and my topic review is on pre-hospital lactate.
Okay.
So that means I have gone and I have looked for all the evidence about pre-hospital lactate and synthesized it and come to the conclusion that we don't have enough evidence.
Okay.
So personally, I'm a fan of lactate. There's a bit of controversy now in the intensive care world about lactate and about how much attention we should be paying to it. I think lactate does identify or can identify people with cryptic shock, and by cryptic shock I mean, so you could have somebody who's got a heart rate of 100 and who's got a temperature of 38.5 and their blood pressure is perfectly fine. Yes, you might conclude that they're septic. But if you get their lactate back at 5, that's someone who's potentially very sick, and that tells me something. That tells me this person is sick, and I wouldn't necessarily have known how sick they were if I hadn't seen this lactate. Or I might not have been as worried about them.
Okay.
So sorry, Alex, to clarify, you're saying that there's not enough data out there, so this simple test that a sports person would do down at their local sports field, if it was put on an ambulance that isn't super expensive to do, would be very useful.
Well, so the thing is as Glen said in his talk, it has to be evidence-based. We have to practice evidence-based medicine. And some of that has to incorporate economics, unfortunately. We have to think about judicious use of limited resources. So the actual lactate strip may not cost very much, but the lactate meter might. So you have to then decide, are you going to give every ambulance a lactate meter? Are you going to give every advanced paramedic a lactate meter? So it's a little bit more challenging when there isn't overwhelming evidence that it would have, that it would impart a mortality advantage. And that's the key. The key is you want to be able to say, if I perform a pre-hospital lactate, then this person will do better than if I don't. The likelihood of this person dying is less.
But yet we haven't got the data. So how do you get a job? How do you get a job without experience? How do you get experience?
Well, there is some research, but like I say, it might be leaning in that direction, but it isn't definitively conclusive, because either the studies were done in one center, or they were done in a couple of centers in one country, or it was very small numbers. It's hard to make a broad application like that unless you have very robust evidence.
There's a question there that Bill or Jill might know the answer to that question.
Bill and Jill will find out in the coming months. Alan Batts says hello from snowy Hamilton in Ontario, Canada.
Hi, Alan Batts.
Keane O'Brien saying hello from Vienna, watching in from there. Wow. It's all shared. So there's a couple
Nothing
of questions.
From Sinead?
Sinead is tweeting about everything that you're saying, but she's agreeing with you. Great talk. Well done, Dr. Alan Watts, CMSPR, on his excellent talk on sepsis.
I wasn't looking for compliments.
Word of the night is #MuckyMuck. Thank you for Alex.
8 o'clock in the morning and lovely sunshine.
Yeah, rub that in. Okay, so the questions are coming in. We're going to follow through. I think it's an excellent talk. We've got to the end of the night, and I think a big round of applause for everybody. So,
can I just ask one question? Sorry. You're talking about sepsis, and everything that's on the screen there is all relevant to adults.
Oh yeah.
When you're looking at a sick child who has no urinary output, who may compensate, may have temperature.
Do I still have to stand up? You should have had a lavalier for that.
No.
So pediatrics is complex by virtue of their changing age and their changing vital sign variables. So a 3-year-old is not the same as a 10-year-old in terms of their heart rate, their respiratory rate. So it's a lot more difficult. Even within the very small kids. So if you have a neonate who has a temperature, so somebody from 0 to 28 days, they're getting everything. They're going to get the whole kit and caboodle. So they're going to get blood cultures, and they're going to get a urine. They'll probably get an LP. I can almost get 100%. They'll get a lumbar puncture. These are for the tiniest babies because they're so fragile and they're at such high risk. So between 1 and 3 months, then it becomes a bit more dicey in terms of what each facility will do. Most will still do everything. Most will still do everything. In terms of trying to identify a source. But you would rarely find a clinician who will discharge a 2-month-old who's got a temperature. Very rarely. It happens, but they, certainly I have spent 6 months as a pediatric SHO in Tala and 6 months as a pediatric reg in Crumlin, and even after that experience, now seeing a 1 or 2 month old, I'm still quite keen to get the opinion of a pediatric senior doctor in terms of their admission status. So I think err on the side of caution with small people, with the smallest people. You know, a 5-year-old is different. A 5-year-old you can talk to, and you can, you know, they can open their mouth and you can see if they've got massive tonsils. You know. Now, having said that, that population is more likely to have viral things going on. So even if they have a rash, depending upon what they look like, it could end up being viral. But if there's doubt, err on the side of caution.
So the likes of our CPGs at the moment don't give us permission to give for meningococcal sepsis. But if we have a child who's very sick, has had a history of lung infection over the last 3 days, been on some sort of treatment, as an AP, would you advocate for us giving? Yeah. And if there's doubt or if there's ambiguity in the CPG, ring for oversight. There isn't anybody who isn't going to. I would find it difficult to say that someone would not tell you to go ahead with giving the penicillin in the absence of a penicillin allergy. Thank you. Good question.
The last week we had 3 presentations very fast, which all ended up being sepsis. And it's kind of like, you know, although we have a set protocol or a set presentation, say, of your FBCs go back, your all that kind of thing, is there a wide variety of presentations of sepsis, say, so that you can get people in with fast?
So really, I'll turn that question on its head. It's actually.
Your attention, please. This is a security announcement. The Royal College of Surgeons is now closed.
They know I didn't go here. So really, it's just turning it on its head, and it's saying that the stroke can present in other ways. So. It's like so that would be a stroke mimic. So sepsis can be a stroke mimic. And that's the thing about stroke and thrombolizing stroke is you have to really be cautious and ensure that you've eliminated everything else that it potentially could be and ensure that it is a stroke before thrombolizing. But certainly sepsis can present in a number of ways, yeah.
Great. Alan,
sorry, gotta go.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. We have to leave. So we're aiming for April the 13th for the next session. For those of you who are watching online, please log in with Eventbrite. Just go on to Eventbrite. You'll see the event there. You have 1 hour to do it. You'll see the event for RCSI. Log on to it and enter your details from there. Thanks very much, guys. Safe home. Thank you, everybody.